You've had a long day. Maybe your body feels heavy, your thoughts a little tangled, or your eyes are beginning to close more often than they stay open. That's okay. You've made it here now. You've found a quiet place to sit, to let things settle. There's nothing more you need to do for the moment. No one to impress, nothing to fix. Just you here now with a little space to rest. Take a slow breath. Let it be easy. However you're sitting or lying down, allow yourself to be just a little more comfortable. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw loosen. Whatever the day has brought you, whether it was full or quiet, frustrating or kind, there's nothing left to solve tonight. You've done enough. You are enough. Now imagine yourself beside a fire. Not a roaring one, just a small, steady warmth that doesn't ask anything from you. The kind of fire that's been tended carefully and patiently. It crackles softly, like a gentle voice that doesn't rush. That's the kind of space you're in now. You're not here to figure anything out. You're here to be still for a while, to listen if you feel like it, or to simply let your thoughts drift and fade. If your mind wanders, let it. If you feel your eyes closing, let them. There's no pressure, no right or wrong way to be here. You don't have to stay alert. You don't have to take anything with you when it's over. This is just a place to pause. So come rest by the fire. Let yourself slow down. Let the world outside grow quiet. You're safe here. You're welcome here. Just breathe. And if you'd like, you can listen for a while. Rest, to the Stoics, was never seen as weakness or laziness. It was not a break from life, but part of it. A practice. A discipline. Just as courage is not simply the absence of fear, but the measured choice to face it, rest is not merely the absence of effort. It is the mindful decision to step back, to care for the self with intention, and to allow the mind and body to return to balance. The ancient Stoics understood that a person could exhaust themselves even while doing what they loved, that too much action, even in service of noble goals, would eventually chip away at clarity, judgment, and peace. To rest wisely, then, was a way to preserve one's strength, not waste it. It was a form of self-command, of choosing with awareness when to act and when to be still. Marcus Aurelius, writing quietly to himself at the end of long days leading an empire, reminded his mind to return to simplicity. He told himself that many things could wait, that the soul needed time away from noise. People try to get away from it all, he wrote, to the country, to the beach, to the mountains. You can get away from it any time you like, by going within. He wasn't romanticizing solitude. He was training himself to remember that peace was a choice, not a location. This kind of rest is not passive. It asks something of us. It asks that we notice when the mind begins to race without purpose, that we observe when the body is clenched from habit, not necessity. It asks for a kind of gentle honesty, the kind that says, this can wait. Or, I don't need to fix this right now. To someone always reaching for more, always solving, building, pushing, rest may feel like a failure, like time lost. But to the Stoic, it's something else entirely. It's time reclaimed, energy preserved. It's the space in which values are remembered, impulses are softened, and the ego becomes quiet enough to see clearly again. Rest becomes a discipline when it is chosen with clarity, when it is treated not as escape, but as restoration, when one learns to step away without shame. It takes strength to stop, not because one is forced to, but because one sees the wisdom in it. The Stoic does not need to prove themselves through endless motion. They rest because they understand the rhythm of life. That exertion and ease must both have their place. Even the great thinkers, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus, all emphasized moderation. Moderation not only in desire or appetite, but in energy, in attention, in how long one carries burdens before setting them down. They saw that unexamined effort could become mindless striving, that it was possible to be busy and still be lost. So they practiced pausing. They spoke of turning inward, of tending to the soul, not just through study or thought, but through stillness, silence, reflection. And this too was a kind of work, but a gentle one, a work that gave more than it took. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The tension you've carried, in your shoulders, in your breath, in your thoughts, it doesn't serve you now, not here, not in this moment. You've earned this pause, not because you finished everything, but because you are allowed to rest regardless. A disciplined rest doesn't mean rigid rules or strict timing. It means paying attention. It means being present enough to notice when you've had enough for the day, when your focus begins to drift, when your patience wears thin and your words come out sharper than intended. These are signs, not of weakness, but of need, needs that deserve your care. The Stoics were not ascetics. They did not advocate for constant denial or suffering. They spoke often about joy, not the pleasure-seeking kind, but the deep, steady joy that comes from living well. And living well includes knowing when to stop, when to close the book, when to walk away from the noise and let your mind become quiet again. Rest is not the opposite of discipline. It is part of it. It is how the disciplined person stays grounded, how they return to their values, their center, their reason. Without it, strength becomes tension. Focus turns brittle. Wisdom gets drowned out by fatigue. And so, each day, the Stoic finds moments to step back, to breathe, to remember what matters and what can be released. This is not laziness. It is restraint. It is awareness. It is the careful management of one's most precious resource, attention. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The deadlines, the messages, the unfinished things, they will be there tomorrow. But tonight, this is your time. Time to come back to yourself. To let your breathing slow. To let the muscles behind your eyes rest. To let your thoughts come and go without needing to chase any of them. Even now, if your mind is still busy, that's okay. You don't have to silence it. You don't have to force anything. Rest begins not with emptiness, but with acceptance, with allowing things to settle naturally, like stirred water becoming clear again. You don't rush it, you just give it space. The Stoics knew that nothing good comes from pushing past one's limit without pause. They knew that recovery is part of strength, that reflection needs quiet, that no one can carry the weight of the world alone. And so they taught themselves, again and again, to return to stillness. So rest becomes not a luxury, but a practice, a daily return, a kind of inward home. And the more you choose it with awareness, the easier it becomes. The more familiar, the more powerful. The world will always ask more of you. There will always be another thing, another step, another concern. But your soul needs space too. It needs silence, warmth, softness, not only to recover, but to remember who you are beneath all the noise. So tonight, you are not doing nothing. You are practicing something vital. You are honoring your limits. You are choosing balance. And in that choice, you are becoming stronger, not weaker. Calmer, not passive. More you, not less. Let the day end now. Let everything soften. Let this moment be enough. There is a kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't rush to respond, doesn't flare up with emotion, doesn't try to win. This kind of strength is quiet, not because it is unsure, but because it is grounded. The Stoics believed that silence could be more powerful than reaction, that a moment of stillness could carry more wisdom than 1,000 words spoken in haste. When someone says something hurtful, or when events around us stir frustration, the impulse is often to act, to explain, defend, correct, or fight back. But reaction, for the Stoic, is not the same as response. Reaction is immediate, unexamined. It is shaped by emotion, pulled forward by habit. Silence, by contrast, holds space. It slows things down. It gives the mind room to observe before choosing how or whether to respond at all. Epictetus reminded his students to notice their first impressions, those sharp inner flashes of judgment, and not to accept them as truth without reflection. He said, "When something happens, the only thing in your power is your opinion about it." That means the moment something stirs within you, you are offered a choice. You can follow the pull of that feeling without pause, or you can breathe, stay quiet, and see what's really there. This quiet is not avoidance, it's clarity. It's the ability to sit with discomfort without becoming it, to feel the heat of anger rise, but not let it burn through your words, to hear criticism and let it settle before deciding what, if anything, needs to be said. It takes discipline to stay silent, not out of fear, but out of care, for yourself, for the situation, for the people involved. Sometimes the strongest thing one can do is to say nothing at all, not because they have no answer, but because not everything deserves one. Not every spark needs to become a fire. This isn't about swallowing emotions or pretending not to care. The Stoics didn't teach suppression. They taught awareness. They believed that what we feel is natural, but what we do with that feeling is a reflection of our character. And when silence is chosen from a place of understanding, it becomes a sign of inner strength, not weakness. You don't have to explain yourself tonight. You don't have to replay the conversations from earlier, searching for the perfect comeback or wondering if you said the wrong thing. Let those thoughts pass. Let the tension go. There is peace in not needing to have the last word. Silence can become a practice, not just in moments of conflict, but in everyday life, in meetings, in conversations, in traffic, in disappointment. The space between stimulus and response, that brief, quiet pause, is where freedom lives. That's where the Stoic finds their strength. Not in always knowing what to say, but in knowing when saying nothing is enough. Seneca often wrote about the importance of maintaining one's inner calm, especially when surrounded by the chaos of others. He observed how quickly people get swept up in the energy of anger, fear, or gossip, and how difficult it can be to return to oneself once drawn in. But silence, he believed, creates a boundary, a soft barrier between your mind and the rush of the outside world. In silence, the noise loses its grip. The emotions of others don't stick as easily. You become less reactive, more steady. And when you do choose to speak, your words come from a place that's settled, not stirred. From that place, even disagreement can sound like respect. Even correction can feel like care. The Stoic uses silence not to dominate, but to protect. Not to shut others out, but to preserve their own clarity. And often, when that silence is held long enough, understanding begins to rise, without the need for defense, without escalation, just space, just time, just breathe. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the arguments dissolve into the background. You are not required to solve every misunderstanding. You are not responsible for every emotion that passes through others. What you carry is already enough. You are allowed to be quiet now. Even in stillness, you are growing. Even in silence, there is movement. The slow kind, the kind that happens beneath the surface. Rest is not only for the body. It is also for the mind that has been pulled in too many directions, and for the spirit that has tried to be strong for too long. There is relief in not responding. There is relief in watching your thoughts pass without needing to chase or control them. And sometimes, when no words are spoken, the world reveals itself more clearly. You see what truly matters. You hear what is usually drowned out. The Stoics found peace not in retreating from life, but in choosing how they engaged with it. Silence gave them that choice. It gave them time. It gave them space to be deliberate, to stay aligned with their values, to act, when the time was right, with calm and dignity. So tonight, you are not being passive. You are not giving up. You are choosing something rare. You are choosing to be still, even when part of you wants to keep talking, keep defending, keep fixing. And that choice, simple, quiet, brave, is what the Stoics called strength. There is a kind of rest that comes not from sleep, but from not reacting, from giving yourself permission to observe without judgment, to release the need to be understood in every moment, to let silence carry you for a little while. You don't need to win tonight. You don't need to make your point. You don't need to revisit anything that hurt. You're already safe, already whole, already enough. Just breathe. Let the tension soften. Let the silence wrap around you like a kind companion. This is where you are strongest, here, in this quiet, without needing to prove anything at all. The Stoics understood the importance of rhythm. They observed it in the world around them, day and night, the seasons, the rising and falling tides, and they recognized it within themselves, too. The body has its own natural cycles. So does the mind. Just as the lungs expand and release without effort, the mind also needs to open and let go. But unlike the lungs, which breathe automatically, the mind often holds on too long. It clings to thoughts, turns over problems, and forgets how to rest between moments. This is where practice begins, in remembering that the mind, like the body, was not made to stay tense. To let the mind breathe means to allow thoughts to come and go without chasing every one of them. It means loosening the grip just a little, not forcing stillness, but letting it return on its own, like an exhale after holding your breath. The Stoics believed that peace couldn't be found by controlling the world, but by learning to release the need to. This release begins in the mind, and it grows with patience. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself about this. He would remind his mind to settle. He would speak to it kindly, like a friend. Now is the time to stop talking about what the good man is like, he wrote, and be one. His journal was filled with these soft corrections, not harsh demands, but steady reminders to return to a better state, to a clearer, more open mind, to a way of being that allowed space between worries. A mind that breathes is a mind that trusts. It trusts that it doesn't have to solve everything right now, that answers will come not through tension, but through space, through quiet. It understands that some thoughts only grow heavier when carried for too long. The Stoic learns to notice when the mind is full and chooses gently to let it empty. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The thoughts from earlier can drift now. There's nothing urgent here, no pressure, just you resting. Just the steady rhythm of your breath, reminding your mind how to soften. Letting the mind breathe doesn't mean stopping thought. It means giving it room. Like opening a window in a stuffy room. Not to silence everything, but to let something fresh come in. A Stoic practices this by stepping back from overthinking, by noticing when the mind is looping, by pausing before reacting to every thought as if it were a command. Epictetus taught that our thoughts are not who we are. They are impressions, appearances. Some are useful, some are not. But we do not have to obey all of them. We can wait. We can ask, is this helpful? And if it isn't, we can let it pass. We can breathe. In this kind of pause, rest begins. Not the kind of rest that comes only from sleep, but a deeper kind. A rest that happens inside, when the mind unclenches, when it stops reaching, when it no longer insists on understanding everything right away. That's when stillness has space to settle in. The Stoics did not seek silence because they disliked thought. They loved thought. But they also understood that the mind needed recovery, just like the muscles, that a mind constantly running would eventually tire itself out, and that tired minds don't see clearly. They react, they panic, they forget their values. But a mind that's allowed to breathe finds its way back, slowly, gently, without being pushed. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the endless lists and worries take their place on the shelf, where they can wait. You don't need to fix anything right now. You don't need to figure out what tomorrow will bring. You are allowed to just lie here, breathing, thinking nothing at all. There is strength in that kind of stillness. There is wisdom in choosing not to overfill the mind, and in choosing that quiet space again and again. The Stoic cultivates resilience. They are less shaken by events, not because they are cold, but because they are rested, because they have learned to let go when needed, because they remember that clarity does not come from grasping, but from release. This is what it means to let the mind breathe like the lungs. Inhale, welcome what's present. Exhale, release what is not. Allow tension to rise, then fade. Let thoughts enter, then leave. And in between, let there be space. Unforced, undemanding space. Seneca once wrote that no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. But he also warned of the mind that overworks itself, that spins itself into exhaustion. The goal is not to avoid effort, but to recover wisely from it. The Stoic learns when to step back, when to rest the mind the same way they rest the body, without guilt. This resting is not indulgence. It's stewardship. It's the care of something valuable. Your attention, your thoughts, your energy, they are finite. The Stoic treats them like resources to be used with care, not wasted on panic, not poured into every passing distraction, but held gently and given time to renew. Right now, that renewal is happening. Every breath is part of it. You don't need to do more. Just lie back. Let your chest rise and fall. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the mind wander if it wants to, but don't follow it. Let it breathe. There is nothing to chase here. No ideas to grasp, no answers to demand. Just this moment, this quiet. This soft place where your thoughts can float and fall away like leaves on a slow-moving stream. There is no rush, no resistance, only rhythm, only rest. The Stoics trusted that peace was not something far away. It was something returned to again and again by choice, even when the world felt uncertain, even when the mind tried to solve things too quickly. The practice was always the same: return to breath, return to awareness, return to what is within your power, and release the rest. And so, here you are, breathing, releasing, letting go. The mind is learning to rest, to soften, to trust. Let it breathe. Let it settle. Let it be. The Stoics spent much of their lives practicing one powerful lesson: to care deeply about what they could control, and to release the rest. It wasn't easy. It meant looking clearly at the things they wanted most: peace, justice, love, achievement, and admitting that the outcome of their efforts could never be guaranteed. They knew they could act with wisdom and still be misunderstood. They could work hard and still fail. They could show kindness and still face rejection. And yet, they chose to act well anyway, because to them, peace wasn't in the outcome. It was in the intention. This is one of the most difficult truths to accept, especially for those who care. When you want to get things right, when you want to help others, when you want to make sure everything is okay, it's natural to feel responsible. Responsible for how things turn out. Responsible for how others feel. But the Stoics gently reminded themselves, again and again, that while effort is within our control, results are not. That distinction changes everything. Epictetus said it clearly: make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. This wasn't a call to indifference. It wasn't about giving up or withdrawing. It was about knowing where your power begins and where it ends. The Stoic still shows up, still gives, still speaks, still tries. But they don't carry the weight of things that don't belong to them, not because they don't care, but because they understand the limits of control. To rest, truly rest, we must remember this, because often it is not the doing that exhausts us, but the weight of trying to manage everything beyond our reach. The moments replayed in our minds, the what-ifs and the second guesses, the anxiety of wanting a certain result and fearing it won't arrive. This is where the Stoic pauses, takes a breath, and chooses to trust that their effort was enough, even if the outcome was not what they hoped for. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You did what you could. You showed up in the way you knew how. You don't have to keep reliving it in your mind. The outcome isn't yours to carry tonight. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the universe has its own rhythm, that things unfold in ways no one can fully see. He didn't use that as an excuse to stop acting. He used it as a reason to stop worrying. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, even what looks like failure may be part of the path. Even when something falls apart, it may still be serving a purpose we can't yet understand. Letting go of outcomes doesn't mean we become careless. It means we become freer. Freer to act without the pressure of perfection. Freer to rest without guilt. Freer to let others have their own experiences, even when we want to protect them. The Stoic doesn't need the world to cooperate in order to feel peace. Their peace comes from within, from knowing that they lived according to their values, no matter what followed. There is calm in that kind of surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that stops fighting against what is already done. There is no need to argue with the past, no need to rewrite what cannot be rewritten. What remains is the present, and within it, the quiet choice to release what is not yours. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the pressure lift off your shoulders. There's nothing left to force, nothing left to manage tonight. The world will turn whether or not you worry. Let it. Even in situations where we feel most responsible. A conversation that didn't go well, a decision that had unexpected consequences, a loved one's pain, we can return to this stoic reminder. We are responsible for how we show up, not for how everything unfolds. Our part is the action, not the result. Our part is to be kind, not to be accepted. Our part is to try, not to guarantee success. Seneca wrote that a wise person is content with what they have, not because they desire less, but because they know they don't need more to be at peace. That includes peace with what did or didn't happen. Peace with the outcomes we hoped would go one way but went another. The wise person rests not in certainty, but in alignment, in knowing that their efforts came from a good place. So tonight, as the day fades, there is nothing more you need to fix. There is nothing left to prove. You can let your thoughts settle. You can let go of the results you didn't get. You can stop trying to rework the past in your mind. Rest is not something you earn by achieving the right outcome. It's something you allow because you've already done what you could. Let this moment be enough. Let yourself be enough. The Stoics knew that peace wasn't reserved for those who succeeded. It was available to anyone who chose to live with intention and then let go. That's the freedom they found, and the rest that came with it. You are not responsible for every outcome. You never were. And that truth, once accepted, can become the doorway to rest, to softness, to sleep, to a quiet mind that no longer has to carry what doesn't belong to it. Let it go. Let it be. You've done enough for today. Now let yourself rest. The mind, when left unguarded, can move endlessly. It circles back to old conversations, replays scenes that cannot be changed, rehearses outcomes that may never come to pass. It turns over thoughts like stones, hoping that something hidden will suddenly reveal itself. The Stoics saw this tendency clearly. They understood how easily thought could become noise, how reflection, when pushed too far, turns into overthinking, and how overthinking is, in their words, wasted motion. Marcus Aurelius called it unnecessary agitation. He noticed how the mind could pull itself away from the present moment, dragging itself into things that weren't useful. He reminded himself, again and again, that the only place he truly had power was here, not in past errors, not in imagined futures, but in this one breath, this one action. To him, anything that distracted from that presence was a kind of spinning, movement without purpose, activity without gain. To the Stoic, rest wasn't only about the body. The mind, too, needed stillness. It needed simplicity. It needed space to breathe. But the overactive mind resists this. It believes that by thinking more, it can gain control. That clarity will come from turning the same worry over one more time. And so it goes on, rehearsing, reviewing, doubting, until the mind is tired, but still unsettled. Overthinking feels like effort, but it often avoids real action. It sits just before decision, just before acceptance. It stalls. The Stoic doesn't rush to shut down thought, but they do ask, is this helping? Is this leading to a clearer view? Or is it just noise? And when they see that thought has become tangled, they gently step back. Not in avoidance, but in awareness. You don't need to solve everything right now. The thoughts crowding your mind aren't urgent. Let them drift. Let them wait. There's rest waiting for you beneath the noise. The Stoics believed in deliberate thought, the kind that serves action, that leads to virtue, that reflects with clarity. But when thinking becomes a loop, when it turns inward and spins, it no longer serves. It becomes a burden, a self-made weight. And so they trained themselves to notice when enough was enough. Seneca wrote, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." How often the mind imagines pain before it arrives, rehearses failure before it occurs, fears things that never come. This is the trap of overthinking. It replaces peace with projection. It replaces rest with readiness, a kind of bracing that never truly prepares, but always exhausts. And yet, there is nothing to fight against. Overthinking is not a flaw. It is something the mind does when it is tired, uncertain, or trying too hard to protect itself. The Stoic approach is not to scold the mind, but to guide it, to return it, gently, to what is real, to the feeling of breath, to the softness of the present moment, to the things that are within reach, not imagined or remembered, but actually here. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let your thoughts slow down. There's no rush. Nothing demands your attention right now. You are safe in this stillness. The Stoics practice stepping back from judgment, from rushing to label things as good or bad, right or wrong. They knew that most of the pain created by thought comes not from the event itself, but from the story told around it. And overthinking is often just that, a story told too many times, in too many ways, until it becomes heavier than it needs to be. Resting the mind means loosening the story, letting it unfold without grabbing onto every thread. It means watching the thoughts pass without needing to follow each one. It means choosing not to engage with every fear, every question, every replayed moment. This isn't carelessness, it's clarity, a decision to keep your energy for what matters. A still mind doesn't mean an empty one. Thoughts will still come and go, but in a rested mind, they don't stir up storms. They pass like clouds, noticed, but not held. The Stoic learns to sit quietly with their thoughts without being carried away by them. And in doing so, they find calm. Not because everything is resolved, but because they've let go of the need to resolve it all. You don't need to follow every thought tonight. You don't need to untangle every knot. Let your mind return to its natural rhythm, like breath, in and out, slow and easy. Let it settle. The more we practice this kind of release, the more space we make for real rest, for sleep, for quiet, for moments of peace that don't require explanation. The Stoics believed that peace wasn't something earned through overexertion. It was something remembered, something always there beneath the surface, waiting to be returned to. So when the mind begins to spin, the Stoic doesn't fight it, but they also don't feed it. They pause, they breathe, they ask whether the motion serves them, or whether it's just habit. And when it's habit, they let it fade, thought by thought, gently, without judgment. Tonight, the same practice is available to you. Each breath is a step back from overthinking. Each moment of stillness is a small return to peace. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to figure out. Let the day end now. Let your mind be quiet. Let this rest be enough. The Stoics looked to stillness not as an escape, but as a doorway. They believed that in the quiet moments, when the world slows, when movement fades, when voices fall away, something deeper becomes visible. Noise, they said, can distract. It fills the mind, crowds it with urgency, demands quick responses. But stillness offers something else. It allows what has been hidden to come forward, gently and without pressure. In a noisy life, it's easy to lose sight of what matters. The mind jumps from task to task, chasing concerns, reacting to messages, absorbing the emotions of others. But beneath all that movement, there is something steadier. The Stoics knew that clarity doesn't come through constant effort. It comes when we allow ourselves to stop, to listen, to notice. Stillness is not just physical. It is a state of the mind, a kind of inner quiet where thoughts settle and space appears between them. In that space, we begin to see more clearly. We begin to feel what we've been too busy to feel. Sometimes we discover that what felt urgent was never truly important. Sometimes we realize that peace was waiting, just behind the noise. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often to return to this kind of quiet. He wrote, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He didn't mean that one must retreat from life, but that even in the middle of it, we can return to ourselves. We can find calm within, but only if we allow silence, only if we allow space. The modern world is not made for stillness. It pushes for more attention, more motion, more reaction. But the Stoic resists this pressure not by withdrawing completely, but by learning when to stop, when to pause, when to protect a moment of quiet, so the soul can breathe. Stillness is not inactivity, it's presence. It's being so completely where you are that nothing pulls you away. It's hearing your own thoughts clearly, without distortion. And it's in those moments that insight often arises, not forced, but revealed, like water becoming clear when left undisturbed. You don't need to search for answers tonight. You don't need to run after clarity. Let it come to you, slowly, in the quiet. Let your mind rest long enough for truth to appear without strain. The Stoics taught that the self is not found in noise. It is found in what remains when the noise fades. In stillness, we begin to recognize our own values again. We remember what we've been avoiding, or what we've been carrying that doesn't belong to us. We see the habits we've been caught in, not with judgment, but with understanding. Stillness gives us a view we can't access when we're moving too fast. Sometimes rest is not about energy. It's about perspective. It's about stepping back far enough to see what we've been missing, to hear the voice inside us that speaks only when we're quiet enough to listen. Not the anxious voice, not the critical one, but the steady, patient voice that waits without pressure. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let your surroundings grow dim. You don't need to perform or explain anything here. Just be still and let yourself come home to this moment. Stillness is how the Stoic resets, not by making dramatic changes, but by returning to what is simple: the breath, the body, the awareness of thoughts, without attachment to them. In that space, the mind begins to settle, the heart slows. And in that calm, clarity returns, not because it was found, but because it was never lost. It was just buried under the noise. Seneca wrote that a wise person is never too busy for themselves. He understood that a life filled with constant activity leaves no room for reflection, and that without reflection, there can be no peace. Stillness is how the Stoic reclaims their time, not outwardly, but inwardly. It is how they reconnect to what matters, not through thought alone, but through quiet attention. Stillness doesn't demand that we be perfect. It asks only that we be present, that we notice where we are, how we feel, what we need. And in noticing, we begin to rest, not just the body, but the parts of us that have been working silently all day. The mind that's been sorting through tasks, the emotions that haven't had time to speak, the soul that's been waiting for a moment to be felt again. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is nothing pressing here, nothing urgent, just a slow, quiet evening and the space to let everything soften. The Stoic practice of stillness is gentle. It is not dramatic. It doesn't ask for silence on a mountaintop or hours of meditation. It asks for just a few moments of being with yourself, honestly and without distraction. These moments are enough. They shape the mind over time. They restore the connection between thought and peace. They remind us that we do not have to chase meaning. It comes when we stop long enough to receive it. So as you lie here now, let the stillness take shape around you. Let it hold you. Let it show you what the noise has covered. Not answers, always, but feelings, truths, a sense of direction that doesn't come from effort, but from awareness. Let yourself rest in this space. Let yourself be still. You're not missing anything. You are not falling behind. This moment is full. This breath is enough. Let the stillness show you what you already know. Let it carry you toward rest. The Stoics understood the weight a single day can carry, not just in action, but in thought. The long stretch of decisions, questions, hopes, and doubts. So much of what wears a person down isn't the doing itself, but the feeling that everything must be finished, every problem solved, every answer found, every uncertainty closed. But the truth, as the Stoics gently remind, is that life does not demand so much all at once, and peace does not require it. You don't have to solve everything today. That simple truth is not an excuse to give up, but a permission to breathe. The Stoics knew that time unfolds on its own terms, and that trying to push too far ahead only leads to tension. They chose to focus on what was directly in front of them. This moment, this breath, this task at hand, and to let the rest wait for its time. Marcus Aurelius often returned to this idea. Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole, he wrote. Stick with the situation at hand. He saw how easy it was to become overwhelmed by everything that might need attention, the unknowns of tomorrow, the mistakes of yesterday. But none of those are available now. Only the present moment is real, and in it we are rarely asked to do more than take one step. Just one. Overthinking tends to disguise itself as responsibility. It can feel like care, like diligence. But when it spirals into restlessness, it becomes its own burden. The Stoics practiced restraint in thought just as they did in action, not because they didn't care, but because they saw the cost of carrying too much, too soon. They trusted that some things would unfold with time, and others might not be theirs to fix at all. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let your body sink deeper into where you are. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. Stillness makes it easier to see what belongs to you and what doesn't. Many of the things the mind circles around, the questions it asks on repeat, aren't meant to be answered right away. Some aren't meant to be answered at all. Seneca observed that many troubles come not from the actual weight of events, but from the way we imagine them. When we try to plan too far ahead, or untangle every knot in one sitting, we trap ourselves in tension. The Stoic approach is patient. It respects time. It acknowledges effort, but doesn't demand perfection. Even in moments of uncertainty, the Stoic chooses to remain grounded. They do what they can with calm and care, and they accept that some things must remain incomplete for now, and that this incompleteness is not failure, it's life. To rest, truly rest, we must release this idea that peace comes only when everything is resolved, that the mind must be completely empty before we can sleep. The Stoics offer a different way, a way of closing the day, even if questions remain, a way of stepping into quiet without needing to finish the story first. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The answers can wait. The world will not unravel in your absence. You've done enough. The discipline of rest is in knowing when to stop, not out of exhaustion, but out of wisdom. When the Stoics laid down to sleep, they did not bring the whole day with them. They reviewed it, gently, noted where they had grown or faltered, and then they let it go. That's all. They knew that rest was not a break from living well, but a part of it. Tomorrow will come, and when it does, you'll meet it with the energy you preserved tonight, with the clarity that only rest can provide. But tonight is not for solving, it's for softening, for letting the tight threads of thought loosen, just enough to make space for stillness. So lie back, let your shoulders fall, let your thoughts come without needing to chase them. There is room here for uncertainty. There is room here for waiting. And in that waiting, there is peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you've allowed it to be unfinished. That's the lesson the Stoics carried with them. You are never required to carry the entire weight of life at once. Just this moment, just this breath, just this step. The rest can come later. For now, let the day end. Let the questions rest. Let yourself rest. The Stoics placed reason at the center of a well-lived life. But reason, to them, wasn't cold logic or constant calculation. It was the capacity to see clearly, to act with purpose, and to live in harmony with nature, including human nature. And because they understood the limits of the body and the mind, they knew that rest wasn't separate from reason. It was part of it. Without rest, reason falters, judgment grows cloudy, patience wears thin. A tired person may still speak, still decide, still push forward. But without rest, those actions begin to drift from wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, burdened with the pressures of rule and responsibility, returned often to this truth. He reminded himself that a calm mind was not a luxury, but a necessity. If you seek tranquility, he wrote, do less, or do what's essential, and do it with less distraction. Even in the midst of empire, he saw that stillness sharpened thought, that a rested mind was a rational mind, that clarity doesn't come from more effort alone, but from knowing when to pause. Rest, in this view, isn't about stopping for the sake of comfort. It's about preserving the capacity to live wisely. It is what keeps the inner instrument tuned, the mind steady, the emotions balanced, the actions deliberate. When one rests, they aren't abandoning reason, they're strengthening it, allowing it to recover, allowing it to see again. You don't have to keep pushing. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to step back and let your thoughts grow quiet. This too is a form of wisdom, a choice made not from weakness, but from understanding. The Stoics never treated rest as indulgence. They treated it as necessary maintenance. Just as a blade must be set down to stay sharp, just as a body must sleep to heal, the reasoning mind must be given time away from effort. Otherwise, even the most disciplined person begins to act from habit, not principle. Reason and rest are not in conflict. They depend on each other. When the Stoic feels overwhelmed, they don't rush to do more. They step into quiet. They reflect. They sleep. They walk slowly. They allow stillness to return before they speak again. This is not retreat. It's preparation. It's the recognition that clear choices arise from a settled mind. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the thoughts lose their urgency. You are not required to solve everything at once. You are allowed to rest now, not as a break from wisdom, but as a part of it. Seneca wrote about the rhythm of the day, moments of effort followed by moments of rest. He saw that even the most productive life must allow for breathing room, that pushing without pause does not lead to more virtue, but to more mistakes. He encouraged balance, moderation, and the regular practice of stepping away. Rest, for him, wasn't a luxury reserved for the tired. It was a part of self-discipline, a deliberate choice to protect one's capacity for thought. The Stoic does not rest out of indulgence. They rest out of care, for their body, for their mind, for their judgment. They know that good decisions come from space, not strain. And they know that wisdom must be nourished, not just through study, but through stillness. To live by reason is to know when to stop, when to step back, when to give the day its end and allow the night to arrive. There is no shame in that, no failure in choosing peace. It's not the avoidance of life. It's how one stays clear enough to meet it fully. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You've thought enough for one day. You've done what you could. Let that be enough for now. Reason, at its core, is a form of alignment with truth, with nature, with oneself. And rest is part of that alignment. It allows the mind to slow down enough to notice where it has wandered, to return to what matters, to soften back into balance. Without that pause, thought becomes noise, action becomes reaction, and the person who meant to live wisely begins to drift. But with rest, everything returns, gently, steadily. The mind finds its rhythm again, the body heals, the breath deepens, clarity returns, not forced, but allowed. That's what the Stoics practiced, the kind of rest that supports reason, the kind that lets wisdom rise naturally. And so, even now, in this quiet moment, you're not stepping away from reason, you're stepping toward it. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts loosen their grip. You've already chosen to live with intention. Now choose to let that intention rest. This is part of the path. This quiet, this stillness, this letting go of what's already done. Trust that the mind will return stronger. Trust that clarity does not disappear. It waits patiently in the calm. You are allowed to rest, and in doing so, you are continuing the work of living well. Let the day be complete. Let the questions go quiet. Rest is not separate from wisdom. It is what brings wisdom back to life. One of the gentlest Stoic lessons, and one of the hardest to learn, is this. Peace often begins when we let go of the need to be right. It's not that being right doesn't matter. It's that insisting on it, defending it, proving it, clinging to it, often brings more strain than clarity, more tension than truth. The Stoics saw that the pursuit of wisdom wasn't about always winning arguments or correcting others. It was about living in harmony with reason, and sometimes that meant knowing when to let things go. Epictetus reminded his students that it isn't what happens to us that disturbs us, but how we respond to it. In many moments, the disturbance doesn't come from being wrong, but from the fear of being seen as wrong, the discomfort of someone disagreeing, the urge to explain, to defend, to set the record straight. But these urges can turn noisy, and in that noise, the mind loses its footing. To let go of the need to be right is not to abandon truth. It's to release the need to control how truth is seen or received. It's to accept that other people will carry their own views, shaped by their own experiences, and that no amount of argument will always change that. The Stoic doesn't run from dialogue, but they don't chase approval either. They know that real strength comes not from being confirmed, but from being calm. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, especially the kind that comes from trying to convince everyone of your point of view. You are not responsible for controlling how others think. You are allowed to rest without having explained everything. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how little control he had over the opinions of others. He wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That doesn't mean being indifferent to truth. It means recognizing that silence, patience, and inner quiet are sometimes more powerful than confrontation. Letting go of the need to be right creates space for reflection, for kindness, for rest. How often does the mind rehearse an argument long after the conversation has ended? How often does it reach back into a disagreement, not to understand it, but to rewrite it, crafting sharper comebacks, better phrasing, more convincing proof? But this mental spinning doesn't resolve anything. It only deepens the tension. The Stoics recognize this as wasted energy, movement without direction, a mind tangled in what cannot be changed. Instead, they practiced restraint, not silence out of fear, but silence out of strength. They learned to measure their responses, to ask whether the outcome was worth the cost, whether insisting on being right served wisdom, or simply ego. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The conversation can be over. The misunderstanding can remain unresolved. You are not less for walking away quietly. To live by Stoic principles is to care more about one's own character than about being perceived a certain way. It's to act in accordance with reason and to accept that the rest is outside your hands, including how others interpret you. This is a kind of freedom. A freedom that allows you to sleep without rehashing old debates, that lets your mind relax without defending every memory. Letting go of the need to be right softens the heart. It invites humility. It opens the door to gentler connections, to moments where being kind becomes more important than being correct. This doesn't mean sacrificing truth. It means remembering that truth often lives best in stillness, not in argument. That peace sometimes arrives when the last word is left unsaid. Seneca warned against becoming tangled in the opinions of others. He saw how often people exhausted themselves trying to explain, justify, persuade. And he taught instead that it was better to tend to one's own mind, to seek clarity there, and to let the rest unfold as it would. Rest comes more easily when we no longer feel responsible for convincing the world. So tonight, let the pressure ease. There's no need to defend your thoughts, no need to explain where you stand. Let that part of the mind fall quiet. Let the arguments go unanswered. Let the imagined debates fade. You are enough, even if no one agrees with you today. You are allowed to be at peace without proving anything. Let the tension leave your chest. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath deepen, steady, and slow. Rest is not just for the body. It is for the part of the mind that feels it must always be understood, always be validated. The Stoics remind us that true rest begins when we no longer need to hold so tightly to our positions, when we are willing to let go, not because we were wrong, but because we are no longer threatened by disagreement. This kind of release is not surrender, it's composure, it's confidence, it's trust in the long rhythm of things, that time will reveal what needs to be seen, that truth will not be lost just because we chose silence tonight. So lie back, let the day be done. Let the thoughts slow. You have nothing left to prove right now. No more words to find, no more points to make. Just stillness. Just breathe. Just the quiet comfort of knowing that you can rest, fully, deeply, without being right. The Stoics observed the body carefully, but they paid even closer attention to the mind. They saw how easily it wore itself down, not always from great labour, but from constant motion. While the body may still have energy to keep going, the mind often reaches its limit sooner. It tires not from a single effort, but from 1,000 small tensions built throughout the day, decisions made, problems weighed, thoughts repeated over and over again. To the Stoics, this quiet fatigue of the mind deserved as much care and attention as physical exhaustion, even if it was harder to see. Marcus Aurelius understood this intimately. As an emperor, his days were filled with responsibility, urgency, conflict. But in his private reflections, he returned often to the idea of balance, of recognizing when his mind needed relief. He wrote, "If you are disturbed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This wasn't just advice about judgment. It was also a reminder that the mind, when too burdened, begins to distort. Fatigue makes everything heavier, slower, harder to understand. Rest, then, isn't just kind. It's necessary for clear thinking. The Stoics believed in discipline, but not in endless strain. They didn't ask the mind to be alert at all times. They didn't expect themselves to be unaffected by pressure or immune to fatigue. Instead, they practiced awareness. They noticed when their thinking became sharp-edged, when their patience frayed, when their reactions felt too quick. These were signs not of failure, but of depletion. And the wise response to depletion was not to push harder. It was to step back, to breathe, to rest the mind before returning to it again. You don't need to solve anything right now. The mind has done enough thinking today. Let it settle. Let it be quiet, even if it doesn't feel empty yet. Mental exhaustion is subtle. It can disguise itself as distraction, as irritability, or even as guilt, and the feeling that you should keep going, even though every part of you wants to stop. But the Stoics gently challenged that impulse. They believed that rest was not a sign of weakness, but of understanding one's limits. Epictetus reminded his students to know what was theirs to carry and what was not, and that included the belief that the mind should be able to carry everything, always. Sometimes the most reasonable choice is to do nothing, to sit in silence, to close the day, even when the list isn't finished. The Stoic trusted that a well-rested mind would return with more clarity than a tired one ever could. They knew that quality of thought mattered more than quantity, that a few calm decisions outweighed many rushed ones. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You've already thought more than most people realize. Let the thoughts slow. Let the tired mind rest without needing to wrap things up neatly. Even in the quiet of evening, the mind may still try to run. It may return to conversations, questions, or worries. This is normal. The Stoic doesn't try to silence the mind by force. They simply watch, patiently, and allow thoughts to pass like clouds. They don't chase. They don't argue. They recognize the movement and they stay still. Just like the body needs rest between physical efforts, the mind needs rest between moments of attention. Not every thought requires a response. Not every feeling needs to be named. The Stoic learns to trust that quiet is not empty. It's healing. It's the space in which wisdom grows, not with effort, but with presence. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to think your way to peace. Peace is what arrives when the thinking pauses. Seneca once described the mind as something that could be cultivated, like a field, but also something that could be overworked, worn out, stripped of its vitality if pushed too hard. He encouraged space for reflection, for nature, for rest, not as indulgence, but as recovery. To him, a tired mind was less capable of judgment, and so stepping away wasn't selfish, it was preparation. Even if the body feels fine, the mind may not. And the Stoics would urge you to listen to that quiet ache, the feeling of not wanting more input, not wanting more questions. That is the sign to close the book, to step outside, or to simply lie down and let the day end. This is part of living well, not filling every moment with work, not demanding perfect clarity when the mind is tired, but knowing when to stop, when to soften, when to close the door on the day and trust that tomorrow can hold what today cannot. So rest now. You are not falling behind. You are not giving up. You are returning to yourself, to a quieter, gentler rhythm. The mind doesn't need more thought. It needs space, stillness, safety. Let this be enough. Let the thoughts float. Let your breathing slow. The Stoics knew that in the stillness of a rested mind, reason becomes stronger, not weaker. Let that truth carry you into rest. Let yourself fall asleep, not because everything is finished, but because you finally allowed the mind to stop. The Stoics looked at worry the way a traveller might look at a fork in the road, something to pause at, observe, and then continue past without letting it stop the journey. They understood that most of what the mind worries about never actually happens. That anxious rehearsals, played again and again in the imagination, often prepare us not for reality, but for scenarios that never arrive. Worry, in their view, was motion without purpose. Energy spent on futures we cannot control, built on fears we have not examined closely. Seneca said it plainly. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. He had seen how a person can lie awake at night, playing through the worst possibilities, convinced that each one deserves preparation. But worry is not preparation. It is a kind of over-practice, a loop. The same scene again and again, slightly adjusted, but never resolved. And the cost is not only sleeplessness. The cost is peace, focus, presence. A mind that becomes too busy preparing for harm cannot rest in the safety of the present. Most worries are just rehearsals for nothing. The mind conjures images of failure, rejection, conflict, loss. But even when these things do occur, they rarely follow the script we imagined. Reality, when it arrives, is usually gentler than our fears, or, at least, simpler. It comes with clarity, not with the confusion of what-ifs. The Stoics saw this difference. They trained themselves not to believe every fear that passed through their minds. And when they did worry, they asked, Is this something I can act on? If the answer was no, they let it go. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, and let the imagined futures fall with it. You are not responsible for controlling what hasn't happened. You are allowed to rest, even with uncertainty. A mind that's tired often turns toward worry, not because danger is near, but because silence feels unfamiliar. So the mind creates movement, stories, predictions, regrets. But this movement doesn't lead anywhere. The Stoics would suggest a different path, one where we simply observe the worry, gently, and refuse to follow it. A thought can arise, and we can let it drift, like clouds, like passing footsteps, seen, but not invited to stay. Marcus Aurelius returned often to this discipline of perspective. He reminded himself that what disturbs us is not the event, but our opinion about it, that much of what we fear is made heavier by the way we frame it. Worry, in that sense, is a kind of distortion, seeing shadows as threats, possibilities as certainties. To correct that distortion, we don't need to fight the thought. We just need to stop rehearsing the worst. Stop repeating scenes that haven't happened. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You've done what you can. The rest can wait. The future doesn't require you to suffer on its behalf tonight. Even the most thoughtful person, the most disciplined, the most reasonable, will worry from time to time. The Stoics did too. But they practiced returning to the present, to breath, to what they could control. They trained their minds to avoid excess, to stop where the helpful ends and the imagined begins. If a worry could guide action, they acted. If it couldn't, they released it. Rest becomes possible when we stop rehearsing, when we step out of tomorrow and back into now, when we realize that the work of the day is done, and that thinking more won't guarantee better outcomes. Sometimes rest is the wisest next step. Sometimes sleep is the answer the mind has been reaching for all along. Most of what the mind fears is softened by time. What seemed urgent at night feels different in the light of morning. What felt heavy can often be lifted with fresh perspective. The Stoics knew this. That's why they encouraged patience, not just with others, but with themselves. A worried mind doesn't need to be silenced. It needs space. It needs rest. It needs kindness. So rest now. Let the anxious rehearsals slow. Let the imagined arguments fade. You are not required to plan every moment of tomorrow. You are not required to solve what hasn't yet occurred. Tonight, you're only asked to be here, breathing, letting the weight slide away. The Stoic path to peace is not found through control. It's found through clarity, through choosing where to place attention and where to let go. And when the mind is full of imagined troubles, the choice is clear. Do not give your night to what may never come. Lie back. Let your thoughts soften. Let the scenes playing in your mind become quiet. The day has ended, and with it, the need to prepare for what may never arrive. You've carried enough today. You've tried enough. And now, the wise thing, the Stoic thing, is to rest. Fully, gently, without needing to rehearse anything more. Calm, to the Stoics, was never something you waited for. It wasn't a mood to be granted by fate, or something to be earned only when circumstances became ideal. It was a practice, a way of meeting the world, a conscious return to stillness, even when the world around you was unsettled. Calm, they believed, is not a gift, but a decision. Not a rare blessing, but a steady choice. And like any choice, it becomes stronger the more often it's made. Marcus Aurelius lived through war, loss, and constant demands, but in his writings he returned again and again to the idea of inner calm, not as something dependent on success or ease, but as something cultivated from within. "You have power over your mind," he wrote, "not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength, for him, was not loud. It wasn't about force. It was the quiet confidence of a person who chooses peace even when difficulty arrives. It was the kind of calm that says, "I won't let this disturb my mind more than it needs to." Choosing calm doesn't mean denying emotion. The Stoics felt deeply. They grieved, they struggled, they cared. But they also understood that to live by reason meant learning when to step back, when to breathe, when to soften a reaction before it hardened into anger or fear. Calm was not detachment. It was discipline, a returning to clarity again and again, especially when things felt uncertain. You don't need to wait for everything to be settled before you rest. Let calm meet you where you are. Let it begin now, in this moment, with this breath. The idea that calm must arrive on its own can keep the mind searching for it endlessly, looking for the perfect conditions, hoping for the world to be just right. But the Stoics knew that peace found through perfect circumstances is fragile. True calm is stronger when it does not depend on the world, but arises in spite of it. It comes not from control, but from letting go of what cannot be controlled. Seneca wrote that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. In that delay is a choice, the choice to pause instead of react, to listen instead of argue, to reflect before deciding. These moments are where calm begins, not in dramatic stillness, but in small, repeated pauses, the quiet decisions to step away from urgency. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The thoughts that race, the things left unsaid, the worries that knock again and again, they do not need your attention now. You are allowed to choose calm instead. Even now, if the mind feels restless, if thoughts are still circling, that's okay. Calm is not the absence of all motion. It's the willingness to slow the motion down, to observe it with softness, to say, "I don't need to chase every thought tonight." The Stoics would not have judged a busy mind. They simply would have asked, what is within your power? And if peace is not yet present, they would gently point you toward the next smallest choice. To sit quietly, to take a deeper breath, to release one thought, even one. The discipline of calm becomes clearer with practice. It shows itself in how we handle stress, in how we speak, in what we choose to ignore. And most of all, it shows itself in how we rest. To rest calmly is to let go of the need to control the night, to allow the day to be over without trying to carry it further. It is not something granted. It is something offered to yourself. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You've earned the quiet. Even if things are unresolved, even if there are still questions, you can be still anyway. You are allowed to be at peace without waiting for everything else to fall into place. The Stoics believed that each of us is responsible for the state of our own mind, not because it's easy to control, but because awareness grows with intention. A calm life is not accident or luck. It's built gently, with choices that soften the noise. It's built in the evening, when we decide not to bring tension into rest, when we remind ourselves that being overwhelmed is not the only option. So tonight, calm is yours to choose. Not all at once, not forever, just here, just now, in this breath, in this stillness. Let the weight fall away. Let your body rest without needing permission. Let your mind step away from its rehearsals and predictions. Nothing needs to be fixed in this moment. Calm does not demand action. It doesn't argue. It doesn't push. It welcomes whatever is here and lets it be enough. The day is over now, and whatever it brought, whatever it didn't, you are still here, breathing, being, and that is enough. Let calm come slowly, like water settling. Let yourself drift toward rest, not because everything is perfect, but because you've chosen peace anyway. The Stoics never measured a good life by how loud it was. They didn't see constant motion or attention as signs of meaning. For them, a life could be deeply fulfilling without being crowded. A person could be at peace without being seen. They believed that stillness didn't mean absence, and that quiet did not mean emptiness. It meant presence. It meant awareness. It meant that you had chosen what to keep and what to release. A quiet life is not a hollow one. In fact, the Stoics would say it's often the fullest, because when you remove the noise, the endless striving, the shallow distractions, the chase for more, what remains is real. The small moments, the steady relationships, the thoughts that come slowly, the kind of clarity that isn't shouted but known. There is richness in that kind of life, the kind that doesn't depend on how much attention it draws. Seneca spoke often about the importance of simplicity, not just in possessions, but in the way we move through the world. He wrote that life is long if you know how to use it, and he didn't mean cramming it with achievement. He meant learning to value time that feels slow. He meant honoring the quiet rhythms of a day, where meaning is felt in the pauses between tasks, in the silence of an evening, in the conversations that ask nothing from you. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You are allowed to step away from the pressure to do more, be more, prove more. This moment is still, and that stillness is not empty. It's full of peace that doesn't demand anything from you. A quiet life isn't lesser. It's often wiser. It allows space to think clearly, to feel fully, to act with care. The Stoics didn't avoid the world, but they did choose how much of it to carry with them. They weren't impressed by chaos or spectacle. They valued what was calm, honest, grounded. They found freedom not in having more, but in needing less. When the mind is quiet, it becomes easier to notice what matters. The noise fades, and what remains is often gentler than we expected. It's the warmth of a familiar voice, the way light moves through a window, the feeling of breath slow and steady, with nothing chasing behind it. These things don't demand attention, but they offer comfort. A quiet life is filled with moments like these, if we let them stay long enough to be felt. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let the need for speed, for productivity, for constant doing loosen its grip. The most important parts of your life may already be with you, quiet, consistent, waiting to be seen. The Stoics didn't deny the value of action. They simply questioned its purpose. They asked, is this necessary? Not everything loud is useful. Not everything busy is meaningful. The person who can sit quietly, who can be content in simplicity, often understands themselves more than the one who fills every moment. In that quiet, the Stoics found something deeper than pleasure. They found peace. To rest well, to sleep deeply, is to allow that quiet to be enough. Not to fill the silence, but to receive it. Not to fight stillness, but to welcome it. Because the quiet life gives more than it takes. It gives space. It gives clarity. It gives energy back to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to look within. that everything he needed was already there, not in titles, not in praise, but in simplicity, in integrity, in the decision to live each day deliberately and to let it be enough. The quieter the life, the more space there is to hear that voice within. So tonight, allow your life to be quiet. Let it be simple. Let it be soft. That is not failure. It is wisdom. You don't need to prove your value by how much you've done today. You are enough, even in this stillness, especially in this stillness. The world may always ask for more output, more attention, more reaction. But your soul doesn't need more. It needs peace. It needs to feel that it is safe to rest, that it can exist without effort, and that the quiet life you're choosing, even just for tonight, is a full one. Let the thoughts fade now. Let the breath slow. You are not missing anything. You are not falling behind. You are simply here, resting in a life that no longer needs to shout to be meaningful. The Stoics never measured a good life by how loud it was. They didn't see constant motion or attention as signs of meaning. For them, a life could be deeply fulfilling without being crowded. A person could be at peace without being seen. They believed that stillness didn't mean absence, and that quiet did not mean emptiness. It meant presence. It meant awareness. It meant that you had chosen what to keep and what to release. A quiet life is not a hollow one. In fact, the Stoics would say it's often the fullest, because when you remove the noise, the endless striving, the shallow distractions, the chase for more, what remains is real. The small moments, the steady relationships, the thoughts that come slowly, the kind of clarity that isn't shouted, but known. There is richness in that kind of life, the kind that doesn't depend on how much attention it draws. Seneca spoke often about the importance of simplicity, not just in possessions, but in the way we move through the world. He wrote that life is long if you know how to use it. And he didn't mean cramming it with achievement. He meant learning to value time that feels slow. He meant honoring the quiet rhythms of a day, where meaning is felt in the pauses between tasks, in the silence of an evening, in the conversations that ask nothing from you. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You are allowed to step away from the pressure to do more, be more, prove more. This moment is still, and that stillness is not empty. It's full of peace that doesn't demand anything from you. A quiet life isn't lesser, it's often wiser. It allows space to think clearly, to feel fully, to act with care. The Stoics didn't avoid the world, but they did choose how much of it to carry with them. They weren't impressed by chaos or spectacle. They valued what was calm, honest, grounded. They found freedom, not in having more, but in needing less. When the mind is quiet, it becomes easier to notice what matters. The noise fades, and what remains is often gentler than we expected. It's the warmth of a familiar voice, the way light moves through a window, the feeling of breath, slow and steady, with nothing chasing behind it. These things don't demand attention, but they offer comfort. A quiet life is filled with moments like these, if we let them stay long enough to be felt. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let the need for speed, for productivity, for constant doing loosen its grip. The most important parts of your life may already be with you, quiet, consistent, waiting to be seen. The Stoics didn't deny the value of action. They simply questioned its purpose. They asked, is this necessary? Not everything loud is useful. Not everything busy is meaningful. The person who can sit quietly, who can be content in simplicity, often understands themselves more than the one who fills every moment. In that quiet, the Stoics found something deeper than pleasure. They found peace. To rest well, to sleep deeply, is to allow that quiet to be enough. Not to fill the silence, but to receive it. Not to fight stillness, but to welcome it. Because the quiet life gives more than it takes. It gives space. It gives clarity. It gives energy back to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to look within, that everything he needed was already there, not in titles, not in praise, but in simplicity, in integrity, in the decision to live each day deliberately and to let it be enough. The quieter the life, the more space there is to hear that voice within. So tonight, allow your life to be quiet. Let it be simple. Let it be soft. That is not failure. It is wisdom. You don't need to prove your value by how much you've done today. You are enough, even in this stillness. Especially in this stillness. The world may always ask for more output, more attention, more reaction. But your soul doesn't need more. It needs peace. It needs to feel that it is safe to rest, that it can exist without effort, and that the quiet life you're choosing, even just for tonight, is a full one. Let the thoughts fade now. Let the breath slow. You are not missing anything. You are not falling behind. You are simply here, resting in a life that no longer needs to shout to be meaningful. The Stoics made a clear distinction between what was within our control and what was not. They believed that peace comes from living inside that boundary, accepting what belongs to us, and letting go of what lies beyond. One of the gentlest truths they offered is this: you cannot control what you cannot reach. No matter how much you care, no matter how tightly you hold the thought, some things will always remain outside your influence. And that's not failure. It's simply nature. They observed the world with calm attention. Weather would change, people would disagree, accidents would happen, loved ones would come and go. These were not signs of a chaotic universe, but reminders that we live among forces greater than ourselves. To try to control those forces, the choices of others, the unfolding of events, the way time moves forward, is to exhaust the mind for no reward. The Stoics chose another path. They learned to release what they couldn't reach. Epictetus spoke about this often. Some things are up to us, and some are not. His whole teaching could be reduced to this one idea. If something is not within your control, if it belongs to chance, to another person's decision, to tomorrow's uncertainty, then worrying about it, resisting it, or trying to bend it will only bring distress. But if something is within your reach, your thoughts, your choices, your response, then that is where your effort belongs. Everything else you let pass. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, especially the noise that comes from trying to manage what was never yours to manage. The opinions of others, the pace of time, the shape of the past. You are allowed to let it go. The mind, when tired, often reaches farther than it needs to. It tries to fix things that haven't happened. It replays conversations, imagines different outcomes, circles endlessly around what someone else might think or feel. But the Stoics saw how much of this is wasted motion. A person can spend their whole night turning over a worry they will never be able to touch. And in that space, there is only frustration, not resolution. Instead of fighting the unreachable, the Stoic turns inward, not in retreat, but in focus. They ask, what is mine to do right now? Can I speak honestly? Can I rest with integrity? Can I show patience even when others do not? These are the small, steady acts that are always within reach, and in them there is peace. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Whatever lies beyond today, beyond your words, beyond your hands, it is not yours to carry tonight. You can let it drift. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to waste energy on things outside his sphere. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. His strength came not from control, but from clarity, from knowing what to release and what to hold close, from trusting that the world would unfold without his constant interference, and that his role was not to direct it, but to respond to it with wisdom. To rest well is to trust this truth, that life continues even when you stop reaching, that the things beyond your influence will move as they will, and that you don't have to chase them to be at peace. Rest becomes easier when we remember what is truly ours, our thoughts, our breath, our willingness to slow down. The Stoics were not passive. They acted when it mattered, but they also knew when to step back. They knew that clinging to things they couldn't shape would only cloud their judgment and exhaust their spirit. So they practiced stillness, not as avoidance, but as alignment, the kind of calm that comes from understanding limits. There is a soft kind of strength in that understanding. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply says, "This is enough for now." It allows the mind to quiet down without trying to control everything that happens next. It brings the focus back to where the self truly lives, in the small, present choices that shape our days from within. So lie down now. Let your breath settle. Let the things beyond your reach stay where they are. You are not less for letting go. You are wiser for it, stronger for it, closer to yourself. What belongs to you will come. What doesn't will pass. This is not detachment. It's peace. The kind that the Stoics knew could only be found by releasing the grip, softening the gaze, and resting in what is real. And right now, what is real is this quiet moment, this still body, this one breath. Let it be enough. Let the night arrive without resistance. You cannot control what you cannot reach, and you don't need to. You are already home. The Stoics understood how much of our suffering begins not in events themselves, but in the way we interpret them. They saw that most pain arises not from what happens, but from the judgment we attach to it. This is good. That is bad. This should have gone differently. That should have never happened. These evaluations fill the mind, stirring emotion, clouding clarity, making peace harder to reach. But what if we let things pass without judgment? What if we allowed events to be just events, without rushing to define them? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to meet each moment without adding unnecessary meaning. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. He didn't mean we should ignore real challenges or pretend that things don't affect us. What he meant was simpler, that we always have a choice in how we name what we experience, that our initial impressions don't need to become full stories, that many things, if left alone, fade quickly on their own. To let things pass without judgment is not apathy. It's care. It's choosing stillness over reaction. It's recognizing that not everything needs to be sorted, analyzed, or understood right away. Sometimes a feeling can move through without being labeled. A moment can come and go without needing a name. The Stoic doesn't try to stop emotion, but they also don't give it more life than it already has. they let it rise, and then they let it fall. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, especially the voice in your mind that rushes to explain everything, to make sense of every discomfort. You don't need to define tonight. You don't need to measure it. Just let it be what it is. So much of what keeps the mind restless is the habit of constant evaluation. Was this a good day? Was that the right choice? Did I say the wrong thing? Will this lead to something better or something worse? These questions may seem useful, but when they come too often, they trap the mind in endless loops. The Stoics saw this and offered a gentler way, a way of seeing each moment as neutral until reason tells us otherwise, a way of withholding judgment until clarity returns, a way of saying, maybe I don't need to decide what this means right now. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore, not to the outcome, not to the explanation, not to the worry that wants to follow you into sleep. Let it pass. Let it drift. When the mind stops labeling every thought, the body can finally rest. There is no fight, no chase, no correction, just being, just breathing, just watching the mind without joining every story it tells. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is soft awareness, a kind of restfulness that begins inside. It doesn't deny experience. It simply meets it with less urgency. The Stoics didn't ask for a silent mind. They knew thoughts would come, but they practiced noticing them like waves, not as threats, but as visitors. Some would stay longer, others would vanish quickly, but all could be observed. Not all had to be followed. And in that observation, there was peace, the kind that grows not from figuring everything out, but from letting most of it pass by untouched. Seneca wrote that we suffer more from our imagination than from reality. And imagination, when paired with judgment, can turn small things into burdens. But when we pause, when we take one breath before reacting, we create space. And in that space, we often see that things are simpler than we believed. Not easier, just clearer. Let yourself rest now. Let today's events float without having to name them. Maybe nothing was good or bad. Maybe it just was. And maybe that's enough for tonight. The discipline of letting go begins with the smallest thoughts. That tone of voice in your head that says something didn't go as it should have. That urge to compare this moment to a better one. That quiet tension behind the need to explain everything. When you see it, you don't need to fight it. Just notice it and let it go. Peace is not in knowing everything. Peace is in allowing things to be unfinished, unnamed, and still okay. The Stoics practiced this not because they had no emotion, but because they valued freedom. And they saw how much freedom lives in non-judgment, in giving yourself permission to wait before deciding, or to not decide at all. So breathe now. Rest your thoughts. The day is over. Let things be as they are. Nothing needs your opinion right now. Nothing needs your conclusion. You are allowed to be here without defining anything. You are allowed to sleep without answers. Let this stillness be enough. Let the thoughts pass. Let your mind be light again. You don't need to follow every feeling. You don't need to give everything a name. Sometimes the deepest rest begins when you finally stop judging what you're feeling, and simply let it be. The Stoics did not glorify endurance for its own sake. They valued strength, but not the kind that keeps pushing long after reason has gone quiet. They believed in courage, but also in discretion. And they knew there was a time to step back, not out of fear or weakness, but from wisdom. The wise retreat, not to escape the world, but to return to themselves, to recover their judgment, to rest their mind, to pause, so that when they re-enter, they do so with clarity. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by the pressures of empire and the chaos of war, reminded himself that peace was not found by conquering more or fixing every problem at once. Nowhere, he wrote, can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. He meant that stepping away is not always about leaving a place. It's about turning inward, about recognizing that constant action does not always bring progress, and that sometimes the most responsible thing we can do is to stop. The wise do not run, they do not hide, but they do know when it's time to step back, not because they are giving up, but because they want to preserve what matters: reason, balance, presence. To the Stoic, retreat is not surrender, it is renewal. It is how they keep from becoming consumed by things they can no longer think clearly about. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the pressure ease. You are allowed to step back now, not because you failed, but because you understand how to rest before you break. There is strength in that kind of stillness, in choosing not to respond right away, in recognizing when your emotions are louder than your values, and pausing before they carry you somewhere you didn't mean to go. The Stoics practiced this often, not always in silence, but in restraint. They understood that not every battle needed to be fought, not every situation demanded a response, not every discomfort had to be endured in the name of perseverance. To rest wisely is not to withdraw from life. It is to move through it with care, to know when to engage and when to step away, to trust that retreat can be part of strength, not its opposite. A wise person walks away not to avoid life, but to protect their place within it. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Whatever has followed you into this night, you can set it down. You're not fleeing from it. You're resting beside it, giving it space to become smaller. The Stoics valued discipline, but not at the cost of inner peace. They didn't believe that constant motion was always noble. A person could be busy and still be lost. A person could be productive and still be disconnected. But the one who knows how to retreat, how to quietly return to their breath, to their thoughts, to their purpose, that person remains steady, even when the world around them is restless. To retreat is to make space for the self, not to run from what is difficult, but to give the mind time to see it clearly, to put down the burdens that are too heavy tonight, to recover what has been frayed, to allow the mind to soften without needing to abandon what it cares about. The wise do not wait until they are exhausted. They do not wait until their words become sharp or their thoughts scatter. They listen earlier. They notice the signals, the tightness, the fog, the heaviness, and they step back with intention. They know that stepping away now can save them from collapse later. This is not indulgence. It is alignment. It is knowing that the quality of our actions matters more than their quantity, that a rested mind is more capable than one that has been driven too far. The Stoic understands that stillness is not a gap in the journey. It is part of the path. Let the tension ease. Let yourself lie still. You are not giving up. You are giving yourself a place to return to, a place where your thoughts can settle, your breath can deepen, and your presence can soften. Seneca wrote that he who is everywhere is nowhere. He warned against being pulled in too many directions, trying to meet every demand, solve every problem, please every person. In trying to be everything, we become nothing. But in retreating, in narrowing our focus, even just for a night, we can rediscover what matters. We can return to the self that doesn't need to be impressive, or strong, or right. Just aware, just whole, just here. So lie down now. Let yourself retreat, not in fear, but in kindness. The world will wait. You do not lose your place by stepping back. You strengthen it. You honor it. Let this moment be enough. Let your breathing guide you. Let the thoughts come and go without needing to follow. The wise know that rest is not what happens after the work is done. It is part of the work. It is how we keep from losing ourselves in the effort. You are not fleeing. You are choosing calm. And in that choice, there is peace. The Stoics knew that not every thought deserved attention. They recognized that the mind produces ideas, worries, judgments, and questions constantly, and that these thoughts, while real, are not always true, or helpful, or worth following. To them, thoughts were like visitors. They come and go. Some bring clarity, some bring confusion, but none are permanent, and none are in charge unless we allow them to be. This is one of the simplest but most powerful lessons from the Stoic tradition. Thoughts are guests, not masters. They can knock on the door, they can speak loudly, they can make strong suggestions. But they do not have authority unless we give it to them. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them, the one who chooses what to believe and what to let pass. Epictetus often reminded his students that we are not disturbed by things, but by the view we take of them. And that view begins with thought, with the interpretation we assign, often without realizing it. One comment becomes a rejection. One delay becomes a failure. One quiet hour becomes loneliness. But if we pause, if we remember that thoughts can mislead, we create space to question them, to decide which ones we'll sit with, and which ones we'll allow to move on. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Not every thought has to be solved, fixed, or figured out tonight. Some of them are simply passing through. The Stoics encouraged a kind of gentle detachment, not from life, but from unnecessary inner turmoil. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength isn't about control in the strict sense. It's about awareness. It's the ability to say, this thought is here, but I don't have to follow it. I don't have to believe everything it tells me. Thoughts can be convincing, especially when the body is tired, when the day has been long, and when silence brings up all the things we didn't get to during the day. But that's when this Stoic practice becomes most meaningful. To notice a thought and respond, not with panic or urgency, but with patience. As if to say, yes, I see you. But I don't need to go with you. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, including the noise in your mind. Even if it feels important right now, even if the thought insists that it matters, you don't have to answer it tonight. Let it stay unspoken. Let it go unanswered. This kind of inner peace doesn't come from silencing the mind completely. The Stoics didn't expect that. They knew the mind would continue to think. Instead, they taught themselves how to relate to those thoughts, with less urgency, less attachment. A thought might rise and fall without stirring emotion. A question might appear without demanding an answer. A doubt might visit, then leave. This, they believed, is real freedom. To live with thoughts, but not be ruled by them. To feel their presence, but not be led by them. To rest beside them, without being disturbed by every one. You are allowed to watch your thoughts come and go without joining them. You are allowed to let them drift, like clouds. You are allowed to rest, even while the mind continues to produce its stories. Seneca reminded us that clarity comes not from more thought, but from quiet thought, from the kind that arises after the noise has passed, and that means letting the mind slow down, not by force, but by kindness, by choosing to give yourself a little space, the space to breathe, to release, to rest, without the burden of needing to resolve everything right now. Sometimes a thought is just a tired echo, not a signal, not a command, just a reflection of something you've carried all day. It doesn't need a response. It needs rest. So lie down now. Let your thoughts be guests. Let them pass through without staying too long. You don't need to be their host tonight. You don't need to entertain every idea, every worry, every unfinished sentence. You can close the door gently. You can turn inward. You can be still. The Stoics didn't try to empty the mind completely, but they did try to make peace with it, to accept that it moves, that it speaks, that it spins, and to remember that not all of it needs to be taken seriously. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who watches, and the one who chooses when to engage and when to let go. Let the day be done now. Let the guests arrive and leave without needing to be fed or followed. Let the quiet come. Let it stay. You are safe in this moment, with no one in charge but you. And right now, the wisest choice is to rest. The Stoics knew that life would always feel unfinished, that even in the quietest moments, the mind would reach for what still needs doing. The project you meant to complete, the message you meant to send, the task that waited all day and now lingers in your thoughts just before sleep. But they also knew that your worth has never been measured by what is pending. You are not your unfinished plans. You are not your to-do list. You are not the version of yourself that hasn't been completed yet. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that perfection was not the goal, only presence. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Simple actions, done with care, one choice at a time. He never urged himself to finish everything. He urged himself to live well within the time he had, and that included rest. He understood that life would always ask for more, and so he practiced letting the day be enough, even when it wasn't finished. It's easy to tie your identity to your plans, to feel that the version of you who finishes more, who reaches further, who stays ahead, is somehow more valid. But the Stoics quietly challenge that belief. They point to the present moment again and again. Who you are, truly, lives in how you respond to what's in front of you. And in this moment, the only thing in front of you is rest. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The tasks can wait. The ambition can pause. Nothing important will disappear just because you let yourself sleep. The mind loves to calculate. It makes little piles of intentions, some for tomorrow, some for the weeks ahead. And when it doesn't finish something, it stores it, carries it, turns it over in the quiet hours. But you are not defined by what you haven't done yet. The Stoics never taught that success was a constant chase. They taught that peace is a discipline, and sometimes the hardest part of that discipline is closing the day with things still undone. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." He didn't mean we should be busy every moment. He meant we should stop wasting the present by chasing a future we can't hold yet. Rest is not wasted time. It is the very thing that allows you to meet your plans with clarity when the time is right. Rest is part of what brings you back to yourself. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Your plans are not slipping away. They're just sleeping alongside you, waiting patiently for when you return. Unfinished plans do not make you incomplete. They do not diminish your value. The Stoics believed that peace came not from checking every box, but from acting with intention and then letting go. The letting go is the part we forget. The gentle closing of the mind, the permission to stop thinking, to stop trying, to simply exist, fully, without progress. This is where rest begins. Not when everything is resolved, but when you no longer demand resolution before you allow yourself peace. The Stoics didn't wait for their lives to be perfectly arranged before they practiced stillness. They knew the world was unpredictable. They knew that some days would end without closure, that many goals would stay halfway built. And yet, they rested, not because they were finished, but because they understood the difference between what matters now and what can wait. You're allowed to rest inside this moment, not as a break between accomplishments, but as a whole experience in itself. Breathing slowly, letting your thoughts loosen, trusting that the things you care about will not be lost just because you are quiet for a while. You are not your unfinished plans. You are the one who created them, and the one who will return to them when your mind is clear again, the one who moves with purpose, not all the time, not with constant pressure, but with patience. Wisdom does not rush. It does not panic. It does not tie your worth to a checklist. So let yourself drift now. Let the day be done. Let the tension melt from your hands, your jaw, your chest. There is no final task that must be completed tonight. No thought that must be followed to its end. Just this, your body at rest, your breath steady, your thoughts passing like gentle waves. And when the morning comes, you'll begin again. But not because you must redeem this moment of stillness. You'll begin because that is what life does. It continues. Even with a few unfinished things, even with the quiet of tonight. Let that be enough. Let it carry you into sleep. You've done what you could. The rest can wait, and so can you. Peacefully, gently, without needing anything more. The Stoics believed in discipline, but not in depletion. They praised endurance, but only when it served reason. To them, strength was not about how long you could go without rest, but how wisely you chose your limits. They understood that there is no virtue in running yourself dry. Even the strongest fire needs tending. Even the clearest mind needs space to recover. The wise, they taught, stop before their strength is gone, not out of laziness, but out of care. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every living thing has its own natural rhythm. He often compared people to vines, animals, or seasons, each one with a time to act and a time to be still. Just as nature takes every obstacle, every impediment, and works around it, he wrote, so too can the mind. And part of working around what drains us is learning to pause, not to collapse, but to prevent collapse. Not because we are fragile, but because we value what we have and want to preserve it. The Stoics watched the way the world unfolded without rush. They saw how even the sun rests behind the horizon, how the sea pulls back before returning to the shore. There is no shame in rest. There is only wisdom in knowing when to stop, before the body grows heavy, before the thoughts begin to scatter, before the effort loses its direction. To stop early is not to quit. It is to choose renewal over exhaustion. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Not to the pressure, not to the pace, not to the idea that everything must be finished before you are allowed to rest. The mind often wants to push just a little further. One more task, one more thought, one more attempt to get ahead. But the Stoics would gently ask, what is gained if the body is spent? If the mind becomes dull? If peace is delayed again and again in the name of doing more? Seneca believed that time is only well used when it leaves the person more whole than before. He didn't admire those who worked until they were brittle. He admired those who moved with intention, who stopped when stopping made sense, who knew that part of a good life is not just in what we accomplish, but in how we protect the ability to begin again tomorrow. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is no need to outrun the day. It's already done enough. You've done enough. To rest before reaching the edge is not weakness. It is strength directed inward. It is wisdom applied to the self. The Stoics taught that you are responsible not only for what you do, but for how you care for the instrument of your doing, your thoughts, your breath, your presence. When you stop early enough to recover, you are practicing discipline. You are ensuring that you can act with reason tomorrow, that you can remain kind, that you can meet the next moment with calm instead of weariness. You are not meant to stretch endlessly. You are meant to move in balance, to work and pause, to give and receive, to offer your strength where it matters. Not everywhere, all the time. The Stoics knew that even good intentions could lead to harm if they were pushed too far. And so they stopped. Not always for long, but long enough to return. You don't have to wait until you break to rest. You don't need to prove your effort by burning through it. Let yourself rest while strength remains. Let it refill naturally, without urgency. The day may still hold unfinished things. That's all right. You are not failing them by stepping away. You are meeting them with care by choosing to pause. There is no race here, no invisible clock. Just you, your breath, your body asking quietly for sleep. That is reason enough. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if something is difficult for you to accomplish, do not assume it is beyond human capacity. But if it is beyond human capacity, do not assume it is yours to do. This kind of humility is part of Stoic wisdom, the humility to say this is enough for now, the strength to step back and trust that rest is part of the work. So lie down. Let the weight leave your shoulders. Let the pace slow. You've done what you could today. The rest is not yours to force. You are not here to conquer every moment. You are here to meet each one as best you can, and then let it go. Let your breathing soften. Let your thoughts quiet down. You have not failed by stopping. You have succeeded in noticing the right time to stop. This is the discipline the Stoics admired most, not the constant output, but the quiet restraint that protects your strength before it fades. Let that truth guide you into sleep. You are not empty. You are resting so you don't become so. You are pausing not to escape life, but to return to it more fully tomorrow. You can rest now. You've already made the wise choice. Let it carry you gently into stillness. Let it remind you, peace is not what waits at the end of effort. It's what begins when you know to stop. The Stoics did not confuse movement with meaning. They watched people rush from one thing to the next, chasing a sense of purpose that never seemed to arrive. And they asked, quietly and seriously, to what end? Because it is possible to move quickly, to cross off tasks, to fill every hour with action, and still drift. It is possible to live at a fast pace, and still not live with intention. The Stoics reminded themselves daily that pace is not purpose, that how fast we go means little if we forget why we're going at all. Marcus Aurelius often paused in his writing to reflect on this exact point. If you seek tranquility, he wrote, do less, or do what's essential, and do it with less distraction. He wasn't advocating for slowness for its own sake. He was pointing to the difference between effort that comes from alignment and effort that comes from habit. It's not wrong to be busy. But when motion replaces meaning, we lose touch with ourselves. The Stoics valued clarity, not speed. They cared more about the root of an action than its outcome. Not because results didn't matter, but because a life filled with fast, scattered doing often forgets to ask the deeper questions. Why am I doing this? What part of me is this serving? What am I sacrificing in the name of movement? Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The need to rush, to catch up, to keep pace, it doesn't belong to this moment. You are safe here, even if nothing is finished. You are allowed to slow down. We are often praised for being productive, but rarely for being thoughtful. The Stoics praised thoughtfulness first. Seneca, in particular, warned against filling time with motion just to feel useful. It is not that we have a short time to live, he wrote, but that we waste much of it. And much of what we waste in motion, hurrying through hours without asking what they are for, pushing past rest, past stillness, past reflection, all for the feeling that something is being done. But pace alone does not bring peace, and it rarely brings satisfaction. If anything, the faster we move, the more we lose sight of what we're moving toward. That's why the Stoics practiced pause, not endlessly, not as withdrawal, but as alignment. To pause is to return to what matters, to check your direction before you continue, to notice whether your effort is serving you or simply carrying you forward without thought. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to keep up with anything tonight. There is nothing chasing you here. You can rest, even if the pace of the day hasn't slowed yet. A quiet life is not a wasted one. A deliberate step is not less powerful than a sprint. In fact, it often leads to more, not because it covers more ground, but because it notices the ground as it's walked. The Stoics believed that peace is found in how we meet each moment, not in how many moments we pass through. Pace is useful only when it serves purpose. And purpose does not shout. It moves slowly, firmly, with care. So when the mind feels restless, when the pressure to keep going begins to build, the Stoic steps back and asks, is this necessary? Is this mine to carry? Will this matter tomorrow? And if the answer is no, they stop, or they slow, or they wait. Not out of indecision, but out of trust. Trust that slowing down does not mean falling behind, that rest is not a delay, but part of the rhythm of a meaningful life. Let the rhythm slow now. Let the body be still. Let your breath move gently. The day has already brought enough movement. Let this moment bring ease. The world may celebrate speed, but wisdom lives elsewhere. It lives in quiet choices, in the decision to pause before speaking, to reflect before acting, to rest before collapsing. The Stoics admired that kind of restraint, the kind that doesn't seek praise, but simply does what is right, without rushing toward it. You are not defined by how fast you move. You are defined by how closely your actions match your values. And those values, patience, kindness, clarity, strength, they do not demand speed. They ask only for presence. So lie back now. There is no timeline to meet here, no race to win, no standard to keep up with. Just you, breathing gently, letting the rush of the day fall away. Pace will return when it's needed. There will be time to move quickly when the path is clear. But, for now, peace is here, and it does not need you to do anything at all. Let that truth carry you. Let it loosen your thoughts. Let it quiet your body. Pace is not purpose. And tonight, purpose is simply to rest. The Stoics never saw stillness as inaction. To them, it wasn't something passive, or empty, or weak. Stillness was a choice, a form of movement turned inward, a deliberate holding of the mind, a quiet command of the self. When the world rushed around them, they practiced slowing down, not because they were uninterested in life, but because they were deeply engaged in it. They understood that sometimes the most meaningful action is the one that doesn't look like doing. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to return to stillness, even during war, even under pressure. "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over," he wrote. "It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." Stillness was not withdrawal. It was strength held calmly, a form of discipline that could weather emotion, stress, and noise, not by overpowering them, but by remaining untouched. The Stoics believed that a person who can stay still, who can pause instead of react, who can remain steady in thought, that person is not idle. They are active in the deepest sense. They are holding themselves in place when it would be easier to be pulled. They are choosing presence over panic, clarity over haste, peace over chaos. That kind of stillness is not a lack of effort. It is the redirection of it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The world will keep moving. But you don't have to move with all of it. You can be still, and still be strong. Stillness gives space for the mind to see again, not just to observe the outside world, but to notice what's happening within. Without stillness, thoughts begin to overlap. Emotions blend into each other. Choices blur. The Stoics trained themselves to recognize when they were moving out of habit and when they were acting with intention. That awareness, the ability to pause and notice, was a kind of inner motion. Quiet, yes, but powerful. You don't need to do more right now. Stillness, when it is chosen, is enough. It is not you doing nothing. It is you reclaiming your ability to see, to breathe, to rest. To decide not with urgency, but with understanding. Seneca often described how the mind becomes exhausted by too much motion, not just physical, but mental. He believed that rest was not the opposite of effort. It was the continuation of it, in another form. A mind that can stay still is not a mind that avoids life. It is a mind that is ready to re-enter it with clarity. In this way, stillness becomes an act of preparation, a way to recover the strength that has been slowly spent throughout the day, a way to protect judgment, protect emotion, protect energy. Not because the world is dangerous, but because you're important. And preserving yourself is an act of care, not indulgence. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The thoughts can move without your attention. The day can end without your involvement. You can stay still and let the rest pass. There is wisdom in knowing when to stop reaching. Not because you've given up, but because you've chosen to rest before the next step. Stillness is the space between breaths, between decisions, between efforts. It's the pause that allows for alignment. And without that pause, even the best intentions begin to drift. The Stoics didn't try to fill every moment. They didn't believe in constant productivity. They valued space, mental, emotional, physical. They understood that just because you can move doesn't mean you should. And just because you're not moving doesn't mean you're lost. Stillness, they believed, is how we return to ourselves, to reason, to peace. So tonight, you're not falling behind. You're not being unproductive. You're practicing something real. You're allowing the body to rest and the mind to slow. That's not nothing. That's the foundation for everything that will come next. Let this moment be complete. Let the stillness settle in without resistance. You're doing something important by not doing. You are choosing calm. You are choosing presence. And in that choice, you are preparing yourself more than you realize. Even as you lie here, breathing gently, even as your thoughts rise and fall, even as the night unfolds, you are not standing still. You are moving inward, gathering, repairing, softening, choosing. Stillness is not absence. It is quiet action. Let it continue. Let the effort fall away. Let your presence carry you into rest. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, still, calm, and ready to begin again, when the time comes. But not yet. For now, this is enough. The mind is not an untamed creature. It isn't wild by nature, only by habit. It follows patterns, ones repeated so often they begin to seem like personality. But, to the Stoics, the mind is trainable, like a muscle or a skill, not through force, but through practice. The thoughts that appear most often begin to shape what the mind believes. The ones repeated in silence become the strongest, and over time, what we rehearse becomes what we obey. When Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to stay calm in the face of provocation, it wasn't because he naturally felt that way. He wrote his reflections because he needed them. You have power over your mind, he told himself, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was teaching himself how to think, teaching his mind not to flinch, not to ruminate, not to wander down paths that lead only to restlessness. The Stoics knew that mental peace does not arrive on its own. It is cultivated. It is gently reinforced, again and again, through small choices. A breath taken instead of a complaint. A pause before judgment. A deliberate turn away from what drains you. These acts are quiet, sometimes barely noticed, but together they form a kind of rhythm the mind begins to follow. Overthinking, fear, defensiveness, these are learned too. They may not have been chosen on purpose, but they were practiced, rehearsed. They arrived, were listened to and allowed to stay, and so the mind adapted, believing that's what it was supposed to do. But it can unlearn just as it learned. It can shift, slowly, kindly. The Stoics never promised instant stillness. They spoke instead about repetition, about being gentle with the self, about returning again and again to clarity, even after being pulled off course. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. You don't need to win against your thoughts tonight. You only need to stop following the ones that don't lead you anywhere kind. When we practice agitation, we become agitated. When we practice blame, we become rigid. But when we practice softness, even just in small moments, the mind begins to yield. It loosens. It learns that not every sensation is an emergency, that not every thought is a command, that peace is something it can trust. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Your mind is listening, not waiting to punish you. It wants to rest, too. It's looking for a signal, a rhythm, a path, one that feels safe, one that doesn't spin. The Stoics were not cold or detached. They felt emotion deeply, but they taught themselves to return to what helped, to remember that their mind could be a calm place, not a battlefield. They trained it through reflection, through patience, through a quiet inner voice that said, "Not this time. We're not going down that road tonight. The mind obeys what you practice. So let it practice silence. Let it practice gratitude, even if it's quiet and unsure. Let it practice acceptance, not because you approve of everything, but because resisting it all has become too exhausting. Let it practice choosing stillness over reactivity, gentleness over judgment, spaciousness over control. This is the kind of work that doesn't feel like work. It happens slowly, sometimes invisibly, but it leaves traces. Tomorrow, maybe you'll notice you didn't spiral quite as fast, or that you caught a thought before it bloomed into worry, or that you gave yourself permission to rest, even when something remained unfinished. The Stoics were gardeners of the mind. They knew that weeds can grow in an instant, but the good things, patience, courage, peace, those grow with care. Not with violence, not with pressure, but with consistency. So as you lie here now, breathing gently, not needing to be anywhere else, just know that this moment matters. Not because it's dramatic, but because it is one more gentle signal to the mind. This is what we do now. We rest, we soften, we practice peace, even if it takes time to believe it. You're not failing by having thoughts. You're only training your mind not to chase all of them. You are gently inviting it home, and over time the mind learns. It learns from what you repeat. And tonight, it learns stillness. It learns ease. It learns that it is safe to let go. Let that be enough for now. Let the day settle behind you. Let the mind loosen its grip. It is listening, and it is learning. Slowly, gently, quietly, just like this. Sometimes the mind works so hard to understand that it forgets how to listen. It searches, analyzes, turns things over and over, hoping that if it just thinks long enough, the answers will come. But the Stoics knew something quieter, something softer. Not all clarity comes from thinking. Some of it comes from waiting. Some of it comes from stillness. Some of it arrives only after we stop trying to force it. Clarity isn't always earned through effort. Often, it's revealed through space. A mind that's been allowed to rest, to breathe, to simply exist without pressure, becomes clearer, not because it worked harder, but because it let go. Like a stirred-up pool settling when left alone, the thoughts that cloud understanding often need stillness more than solving. Marcus Aurelius, in his Reflections, often reminded himself to retreat inward, not to think more, but to become more aware of what was already there. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul, he wrote. He didn't say, figure it out. He said, go within. Not to wrestle the problem into submission, but to reconnect with the steady part of the self that doesn't panic or chase or spin. The Stoics believed that reason was our greatest tool, but they also understood its limits. When the mind is tired, more thinking only leads in circles. It begins to mistake motion for progress. Repetition becomes confusion. The harder it tries, the harder it becomes to see. That's why rest was never viewed as weakness by Stoic thinkers. Rest was strategic. Rest was essential. Not just for the body, but for the mind. Because sometimes stepping back is the only way to see something clearly. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. let your mind loosen. Let it stop reaching. The answer you're grasping for might not be found through force. It might already be waiting beneath all the noise. Clarity often rises in moments that look like doing nothing. A quiet walk, a long breath, a gaze out the window. The Stoics did not rush these things. They understood that some forms of knowing come through stillness, a sense, a feeling, a quiet alignment. Not everything must be sorted into words. Not every feeling must be named to be understood. So much tension builds when we believe we have to resolve everything with our thoughts. But the Stoics would ask, is it urgent? Is it useful? Is it even within your control? And if the answer is no, then the wise thing may be to rest. Not as surrender, but as trust, that time and stillness often do more than worry and force ever could. Even Epictetus, who taught in clear and direct terms, warned against overthinking. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He wasn't advocating ignorance. He was inviting humility, the kind that lets the mind release its grip and recognize that not all answers come from more thinking. Some come from stepping aside. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let the inner voice grow quieter, not because you've silenced it, but because you've stopped feeding it with urgency. The mind will keep turning as long as it's asked to solve what cannot be solved right now. But it will rest too, if you let it. There is a kind of wisdom that comes only in stillness, a kind of knowing that arrives like morning light, slow and gentle and sure. The Stoics trusted this. They believed in doing their part, in using reason, in planning wisely, but they also knew when to pause, when to let the storm pass before deciding which direction to go. A tired mind cannot see far. Just like eyes that stare too long into brightness begin to blur, the mind loses focus when it works without pause. Letting go is not abandoning responsibility. It's honoring limits. It's choosing peace over control, especially when control is only imagined. You're allowed to rest, even if things are unresolved. You're allowed to stop searching, even if there's more to understand. The mind is not a machine to be pushed past its limits. It is something alive, something sensitive, something that needs quiet just as much as stimulation. So let it be quiet now. Let it stop chasing clarity and simply rest in the fact that not everything must be decided tonight. There is time, there is space, and there is wisdom that lives in silence, waiting patiently until the noise recedes. Not all clarity comes from thinking. Some comes from stepping back, from breathing deeply, from letting the mind return to stillness. In that stillness, what truly matters often becomes clear, not through effort, but through simplicity, through calm, through rest. True reflection is not something squeezed out by force. It isn't the product of mental strain, nor is it born from urgency. It arrives when the mind is given room, when thoughts are allowed to unfold without being pushed or pressed. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't chase insight through tension. They created the conditions for it to come naturally, like water clearing when the river slows. Marcus Aurelius often returned to the idea of creating inner space. People seek retreats for themselves, in the country, by the sea, in the mountains, he wrote. But nowhere can a person find a retreat more peaceful or more free from trouble than in their own soul. What he was describing wasn't escape, but space. Space to observe, space to breathe, space to reflect without interruption or demand. When we try too hard to think clearly, we often cloud the very clarity we seek. Reflection requires patience, not pressure. It's like watching the sky. If you squint and strain, the stars don't appear faster. You simply wait. You allow the darkness to settle in, and then, gently, the stars begin to emerge on their own. Insight works the same way. There is a kind of tension that builds when the mind feels it must always be productive, that every pause is a delay, that thinking must be hard work to be worthwhile. But the Stoics would remind us, not everything improves through effort. In fact, some things only grow clearer when we release effort, when we stop reaching and begin receiving. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let yourself soften. Let the questions sit quietly without needing answers right away. The mind does not bloom under pressure. It unfolds when given kindness, when treated not as a task to complete, but as a companion to understand. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And often, it's in the silence between our thoughts, not in their analysis, that we begin to see what's real and what's imagined. When we're rushing to figure things out, everything feels urgent. But when we give ourselves time to reflect without pressure, the noise begins to separate from the truth. That's when we begin to see what actually matters. Space is not emptiness. Space is what allows ideas to breathe. Just as lungs expand only when we allow them to, not when we squeeze them, so too the mind expands when we trust it to find its rhythm. When we no longer demand immediate clarity, when we give it rest. And in that rest, reflection deepens. This is why the Stoics practiced daily journaling, not as an exercise in intense thought, but as a quiet moment of spaciousness, a place where thoughts could land, where emotions could be acknowledged without judgment, where the noise of the world could be sorted gently, not solved all at once. It wasn't a ritual of strain, it was a ritual of stillness. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let your thoughts float for now, like clouds across a wide sky. You don't need to grab them. Just let them be. Let them drift and return and change shape. The ones that matter will remain. The rest will pass. Reflection that comes from strain is usually shallow. It's fueled by the need to fix, to explain, to control. But when reflection is given space, when it's welcomed without pressure, it becomes something softer, more honest, more compassionate. It sees not just what's broken, but what's quietly working. Not just what's missing, but what's already enough. The Stoics believed that peace came from living in alignment with nature, and nature doesn't hurry. The seasons turn without anxiety. The moon rises without panic. There is movement, yes, but it's not rushed. There is purpose, but never strain. Our minds were shaped by that same rhythm. When we allow ourselves to rest in that rhythm, reflection begins to feel like coming home. No one can reflect clearly while exhausted. No one sees deeply when overwhelmed. And no meaningful insight comes from pushing the mind past its limits. What the Stoics teach us, gently and firmly, is that wisdom grows in silence. It matures in calm. It arrives not as a shout, but as a whisper, one we can only hear when we've made room for it. So let this be the space now, not to solve anything, not to decide, just to reflect, without effort, to notice, to observe, to let things surface in their own time. That is how the mind begins to rest. That is how reflection becomes a gift, not a task. And when the mind is given space, something beautiful happens. It begins to heal. It begins to let go. It begins to show us what we couldn't see before. Not because we weren't trying hard enough, but because we were trying too hard. Let there be space now, not answers, just space. That's all reflection really needs. Anxious thoughts often arrive with urgency. They knock at the door of the mind without warning, without invitation. They speak in the voice of obligation, as if their presence alone demands your attention, as if you are bound to respond, to react, to engage. But you're not. You never were. The Stoics saw the mind as something that could be trained, not to ignore the world, but to respond wisely, to separate what deserves care from what only demands it. An anxiety, for all its noise and tension, does not deserve your devotion. It only pretends to. Epictetus reminded his students that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The anxious mind doesn't see the world as it is. It imagines futures. It replays moments that are already gone. It spins possible outcomes, worries over what-if scenarios, reopens settled questions. And in doing so, it drains your energy for the things that actually need it. To rest, truly rest, is to recognize that anxious thoughts are not facts. They are not duties. They are not debts you have to pay. You owe them no answers, no reaction, no space in the middle of your night. They are not your guides. They are not your guardians. They are only habits, patterns the mind has rehearsed. And habits, no matter how familiar, can be softened with gentleness. Not through resistance or shame, but through awareness. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Let go of the urge to argue with every anxious voice in your head. You don't need to convince them. You don't need to silence them. You only need to stop treating them as authorities. Marcus Aurelius wrote often of the discipline of perception. He believed that we are constantly shaping our inner world with our attention. And when we place too much attention on fear, we build a home for it. But we can also withdraw that attention. We can choose to let anxious thoughts pass by like strangers in the street, noticed, but not welcomed in. The anxious mind thrives on urgency, but the wise mind answers with calm, not with denial, not with control, but with a steady reminder. Not every thought is worth following. Not every signal requires a response. There's a quiet power in the ability to say, this doesn't need to be solved right now. To feel the tension rising and decide not to feed it. To hear the voice of worry and respond, not with panic, but with space. That's what the Stoics practiced, not the elimination of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let your mind drift away from its usual loops. You don't owe those loops another turn. They will go on without you. Let them. You can step aside, just for now. It's easy to mistake anxious thoughts for responsibility, as if worrying itself is a kind of work, as if your effort alone could prevent pain or fix the future. But worrying is not preparation. It is exhaustion disguised as effort. And rest cannot happen while that disguise remains. Seneca advised that we learn to separate what we fear from what is actually harmful. He warned against lending suffering to the future before it arrives. And that's what anxiety often is, suffering borrowed in advance. Imagined pain rehearsed again and again, with no clarity and no conclusion. But you're allowed to pause that rehearsal. You're allowed to let the curtain fall, even if the scene doesn't feel finished. You are not required to resolve every feeling before you sleep. You are not accountable to every imagined scenario that flickers through your thoughts. You're allowed to rest, even while things remain uncertain. The mind doesn't always settle by thinking more. Often, it settles by thinking less, by giving itself permission to soften, to release its grip on the world for a little while. That is not avoidance. That is wisdom. That is the strength of knowing when to stop trying. Not because you failed, but because trying has nothing more to offer. So much of peace is just remembering what you can let go of. And tonight, it might be this: the belief that anxious thoughts are your responsibility. They are not. They are habits of fear. And fear is not your master. You are not the sum of your concerns. You are not measured by your ability to anticipate every outcome. You are not here to be alert at all times. You are here to live with presence. And sometimes that presence means resting, even when your mind wants to keep pacing. The Stoics knew that clarity comes when we stop grasping, that stillness is not passivity, but power. And part of that stillness is a choice, a decision to stop giving anxious thoughts the authority they claim. Tonight, you don't need to be on guard. You don't need to plan ahead. You don't need to prepare for everything that could go wrong. Let yourself come back to the simplicity of this moment, this breath, this body, this quiet. You owe nothing to your anxious thoughts. They are not your tasks. They are not your truth. You are free to let them pass. And in their passing, you may notice something softer beginning to rise. A kind of lightness, a calm that doesn't demand anything from you, only that you rest, only that you return to yourself, only that you remember. You are already enough. It takes a certain kind of bravery to let go of the day, to release control, to stop monitoring the world, to trust that what needs to unfold will unfold, with or without your watchful gaze. The Stoics taught that courage is not always loud. It doesn't always appear as bold action or forceful response. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it looks like closing your eyes and choosing to rest, even when the world outside is unfinished. Sleep invites us to surrender, and surrender for many feels unnatural. There's always something else to do, another thought to chase, a task to finish, a question to resolve. But resting when your mind is still restless, that is courage. Going to sleep without needing everything tied in a bow, that is strength. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often returned to the idea that life is lived in the present moment. Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about your neighbours, he wrote, unless with a view to some mutual benefit. In other words, let go of what does not belong to you. Even the worries that feel personal are often not yours to carry into sleep. There's a deep trust involved in sleeping. Trust that the world will keep turning. Trust that your body knows how to mend itself. Trust that your thoughts can pause, that your soul can breathe, without needing your constant attention. That trust, when given freely, becomes a kind of bravery, the willingness to rest in the face of uncertainty. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The muscles of your mind can soften now. The world doesn't need your vigilance this moment. You're allowed to set it down. The Stoics weren't hard or cold, though they're often misunderstood that way. They were tender in their understanding of life's difficulty. They recognized that fear shows up in many forms, not just fear of death or loss, but fear of quiet, fear of stillness, fear of not doing. They encourage the practice of stepping back again and again into what is real and what is enough. And sometimes, what is real and enough is simply lying still and letting the breath do its quiet work. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The same can be said of sleep. So many restless nights are spent fearing what might come, worrying what might be missed, or rehearsing troubles that have not yet arrived. But sleep is not a withdrawal from life. It is a return to your center. A gentle reminder that you are not defined by your performance, your output, or your plans. You are defined by your being. To sleep well is to accept that rest is not a reward. It is a requirement. And it is courageous to give it to yourself without needing to earn it. To say, I have done enough for today. I will do no more. I will let the mind loosen its grip and sink into the silence that heals. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is also humility in sleep, a quiet recognition that you are not the axis on which the world spins, that life can go on without your supervision. The Stoics often reminded themselves of their smallness in the grand movement of nature, and in that smallness they found relief. They found space to be at peace with what they could not control. Sleep is one of the purest expressions of this humility, a wordless agreement between you and the cosmos that says, I will rest now, I will trust now. Some part of you might resist, the part that is used to solving, planning, preparing. But rest is not the enemy of responsibility. It is what makes responsibility possible. Without it, your strength withers, your judgment fades, your patience shrinks. True courage is not burning the candle down to the end. It's knowing when to blow it out. You are not weak for needing rest. You are wise for honoring it. And you are allowed to rest even while the inbox is full, even while the conversation is unfinished, even while the answers are unclear. The Stoics would not ask you to ignore these things. They would only remind you that they do not all belong to this hour. Some can wait. Some will resolve on their own. Some may not matter tomorrow. And for now, sleep is more important than solutions. You are not sleeping to escape the world. You are sleeping to meet it again, steady and restored. Even the strongest minds need that return. Even the wisest souls deserve that pause. So let yourself have it. The lights can dim now. The breath can slow. The thoughts will try to stir again. That's what they do. But you can meet them with stillness. You can say quietly, not now. Sleep, in its own way, is an act of defiance against the idea that you must always be doing. It is a declaration that your being is enough, even in stillness, even in silence. And as your body settles deeper into rest, remember, you're practicing a different kind of bravery now. One that doesn't shout, one that doesn't struggle, one that simply lets go. Not from weakness, but from trust. You are safe, you are here, and you are free to sleep. There's a kind of quiet wisdom in letting the day come to a close without needing to rewrite it. The Stoics understood that no amount of thinking can undo what's already been lived. The day has happened. It unfolded exactly as it did. Whatever you did or didn't do, whatever was said or left unsaid, has already passed into the stream of time, and like a river, there's no swimming back upstream. You can only allow the current to carry you forward, gently, without resistance. To resist the end of the day is to carry the weight of things that can no longer be changed. It's like clenching your fist around the air. It does nothing but exhaust the hand. What happened today belongs to the past. The present moment, the one you're in now, holds only rest. Epictetus said, "Seek not for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will have peace." That peace is found in surrendering to the truth that today is already written. There is no more work to be done on it. There is only the quiet act of stepping away from the effort of fixing, improving, or rethinking. This does not mean giving up on growth. It means recognizing that growth doesn't come from grasping. It comes from allowing time to pass, letting sleep do its invisible work, and waking with a fresh mind tomorrow. The Stoics practiced evening reflection not to obsess over mistakes, but to observe, to understand, and then, most importantly, to let go, to forgive themselves for being human, to place the day where it belongs, behind them. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. What's done is done. What's undone can wait. You're allowed to loosen your grip now. There's a gentle strength in not demanding resolution. Not everything needs to be finished before you rest. The conversation can remain open. The project can be incomplete. The dishes can sit in the sink. What matters now is that your body is calling for stillness, and your mind deserves a break from trying. Let the day close its eyes alongside you. The Stoics saw time as something beyond control. It moves with or without our permission. They would ask, if something is already behind you, why keep dragging it forward? Why rehearse it again in thought, over and over, as if doing so might change it? There is no need to argue with the past. There is only the opportunity to greet the present with softness. And right now, the present is asking for quiet. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. It's tempting to think that we can force a day to make sense before we close our eyes. But clarity often comes not from effort, but from rest. The brain settles when we stop stirring it. Emotions calm when we stop feeding them with resistance. It's in the silence between moments that understanding quietly arrives, without pressure, without strain. Some days feel heavy. Some are full of mistakes. Others are just strange, scattered, or forgettable. But none of them last forever. And none of them define you completely. Even in a difficult day, you are not just the things that went wrong. You are still the one who tried, who noticed, who cared. That is enough. Seneca once wrote, "Night brings our troubles to the end and reminds us of our natural limit." Rest isn't weakness. It's the wisdom of knowing when to stop. It's choosing to step out of the rush and say, that's enough for now. There's no need to finish the story tonight. You can close the book mid-chapter. You can return to the questions tomorrow. For now, there's nothing more to figure out. You are not a machine. You are not a task list. You are a living being who needs quiet just as much as movement. And when the day begins to fade, it's not a signal to squeeze more into the time that's left. It's a gentle invitation to slow down, to let your mind rest in the safety of stillness, to treat the end of the day not as a failure to do more, but as a success in knowing when to stop. The Stoics believed that virtue lies in what's within your control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses. But once the day ends, even those belong to yesterday. Now belongs to sleep. Now belongs to peace. Let yourself fall into it. Let the pace of your thoughts soften. Let your breath slow. Let your body sink just a little deeper into where it is. And whatever the day contained, joy, tension, confusion, laughter, let it pass through you without clinging. You have done enough for today. You don't need to win the night with more effort. The victory now is in resting, in allowing the day to close without dragging it into your dreams. Leave the doors of the mind slightly open, not for analysis, but for release. And if there is something unresolved, a conversation that lingers, a regret that echoes, you can acknowledge it, then place it down beside you. You don't have to carry it into your sleep. Let the day end without resistance. Let it go where all days go, into the past, into memory, into rest. You are safe now. You are held by the quiet. And there is nothing more you need to do. There's a subtle tension that often hides beneath the surface of a calm life. The quiet urge to tweak, adjust, or improve things that are already fine, just as they are. The Stoics understood this impulse well. They knew the mind can stir itself into restlessness, not because something is truly wrong, but because it has forgotten how to accept what is right. It is a modern habit to believe that every moment should be optimized, every thought examined, every emotion managed. But this creates a background pressure, the constant feeling that something needs attention, something needs changing. Even when nothing is truly broken, the mind will search for cracks. And in doing so, it loses the ability to rest. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to meddle in what is already in good order. He wrote, "If you seek tranquility, do less. Or, more accurately, do what's essential." It wasn't about doing nothing, but about stepping away from the compulsion to refine endlessly. A good day doesn't need to be rewritten. A still moment doesn't need more meaning. A peaceful state doesn't need to be justified. Sometimes peace is unsettling precisely because it's unfamiliar. When everything feels quiet, the mind starts whispering questions. Should I be doing more? Should I be preparing for something? But not every moment is a prelude to difficulty. Not every stillness needs to be earned. The Stoics believed in preparation, yes, but they also believed in presence. When a moment of calm arrives, the wise thing is to receive it, not interrogate it. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. If there's no fire to put out, you don't need to keep looking for smoke. There's a difference between growth and interference. A tree grows by leaning toward the sun, not by being propped up and adjusted constantly. In the same way, the soul finds strength in space. When something in your life is working, your relationships, your habits, your state of mind, you're allowed to enjoy it. You don't need to question it simply because it feels unfamiliar to be at peace. This is especially true when the day is ending. The natural rhythm of rest invites stillness. But if the mind is conditioned to fix, to solve, to improve, it will search for tasks even where none exist. It will revisit conversations, replay decisions, and scan for imperfections. This habit is not a reflection of truth, only of fatigue. The Stoics knew that tired minds often see shadows where there are none. It is not wisdom that stirs that kind of activity. It's restlessness. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There's a gentle power in knowing when to leave something alone, in letting harmony remain untouched. Seneca spoke of this in his letters, the idea that nature, left to itself, has a rhythm worth trusting. He wrote of how a wise person lives in accordance with nature, not in constant resistance to it. Sometimes that means choosing not to stir the water. When the surface is calm, it reflects more clearly. But if we poke at it with thoughts and concerns, we muddy the image and lose our own sense of stillness. Some nights, the mind will tell stories of unfinished business, things you didn't say, tasks you could have done better, small errors made in the rush of the day. But ask yourself gently, is any of it broken? Is anything truly in need of repair right now, in this quiet moment? Or are these just old patterns of thought, looking for something to do? You can allow stillness to be enough. You can breathe, without needing to understand everything. You can rest without needing to deserve it. There is a quiet kind of discipline in not disturbing what is peaceful. It takes trust to believe that not every silence is a problem. Not every emotion needs unpacking. Not every ordinary day needs to become extraordinary. The Stoic ideal was never about control for its own sake. It was about clarity. And clarity often means knowing when to stop adjusting and start accepting. Peace can feel strange because the world moves fast. But you don't have to match its speed. You don't have to keep editing your life to prove you're doing it right. The life you have, this one, right now, is already in motion. If nothing feels broken, you're allowed to stop fixing. You're allowed to stop explaining, striving, adjusting. You can just be. There is wisdom in restraint, in choosing not to disturb what is already flowing well. A conversation that ended gently doesn't need a follow-up message. A task completed doesn't need a second round of checking. A plan that worked doesn't need to be upgraded overnight. The constant improvement mindset may help you succeed in the world, but it can also prevent you from resting within yourself. This is not laziness. It is awareness. It's understanding the difference between what needs your attention and what only asks to be left in peace. So tonight, let the things that are fine remain untouched. Let your body know that it is safe. Let your thoughts find their own way to stillness without your constant supervision. And if a question rises in your mind, what more should I do? You can smile at it gently and say, nothing right now. That is a complete answer, and it's enough. The Stoics believed that the mind, left unobserved, often behaves like a restless traveller, wandering from one worry to the next, picking up burdens it doesn't need to carry. Thoughts come and go, and many of them arrive without invitation. They appear suddenly, like shadows at dusk, hinting at problems, fears, plans, or memories. But what gives these thoughts power is not their presence. It's our decision to follow them. Epictetus compared the mind to a garden. Thoughts are like seeds scattered by the wind. Some are nourishing, others invasive. But not every seed must be allowed to take root. Not every idea needs water and sunlight. The first task, he said, is to become aware of what is entering. The second is to decide what stays. At the end of a long day, when the body begins to settle and the outer world grows quiet, the mind often becomes louder. This is not unusual. It's simply the space where all the day's thoughts gather. And in this gathering, many will demand attention, some gentle, others loud. But none of them are you. They are just passing voices, shaped by memory, by expectation, by old patterns. You can watch them without climbing aboard. A person sitting by a river does not leap into every current. They sit, they listen, they observe. A thought is no different. You may notice a worry float by. Did I do enough today? You may sense the beginning of a judgment. I should have said something else. You may hear the first steps of a mental to-do list forming. All of this is natural, but none of it needs to be followed. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. He wasn't denying real pain, only pointing out that many of our discomforts are built in the mind, rehearsed again and again in silence. Watching your thoughts without following them means letting the rehearsals end. It means stepping out of the audience and refusing to play along. Not every thought is true. Not everyone is kind. Some are simply echoes from a long time ago. Some are fear wearing the mask of logic. Some are habits triggered by small things you didn't notice. A word, a tone, a memory, a sigh. But none of this means you are trapped. You have the right to rest, even if your thoughts insist otherwise. You have the right to pause, even if your thoughts keep moving. You have the right to sit beside your thoughts like a quiet observer, nodding to them gently without rising from your seat. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is no need to fight your thoughts. Watching is not resistance. It is awareness, a kind of quiet strength that grows in stillness. If a fear rises, you notice it. If a memory appears, you observe it. If your mind starts telling stories of what might go wrong tomorrow, you let the story play out, without acting on it, without answering it, without chasing after its ending. This space between thought and action is where freedom lives. And this is where rest begins. Because rest does not mean the absence of thought. It means the absence of pursuit. It is possible to be full of ideas and still be at peace. The Stoics never said you must erase your thoughts. They only said you do not need to obey them. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Marcus Aurelius, who bore the weight of empire, reminded himself often that the soul becomes dyed with the colour of its thoughts. This wasn't a warning, it was a choice, a gentle reminder that while thoughts may arise on their own, the ones we keep close will shape us. So let the ones that bring peace stay longer. Let the ones that unsettle drift past, like birds overhead. You can look up without following their flight. Tonight, your thoughts may try to keep the day alive. They may revisit conversations. They may wonder what someone meant. They may plan for a future you haven't arrived at. But none of that needs your participation. You can notice without investing. You can acknowledge without reacting. You can simply be here. And here is enough. Here, where your breath still moves, where your body still rests, where your presence alone is complete. There is nothing to solve, no riddle to decode. The thought will pass, and if it doesn't, it will soften in time. Even the mind grows tired eventually, and when it does, it's okay to let it settle, not by pushing thoughts away, but by no longer walking behind them. Let them drift, let them circle, let them fade. The mind will try to return to the path it knows, worry, fixing, doubting, scanning. But you can gently remind it, not now, not tonight. This is not the time for chasing. This is the time for sitting still. Let the river run without you in it. Let the weight of all those inner voices dissolve in the quiet. And if a thought returns again, knocking at your attention, you don't have to open the door. You can just smile inside and say, I see you, but I'm not going with you tonight. And that small act, that decision not to follow, is enough. Urgency is not always the result of a real emergency. Often, it's just the echo of expectation, the belief that something must happen now, or that something is wrong simply because it hasn't happened yet. The Stoics understood this sensation well. The pressure to respond, to act, to solve, even when nothing immediate calls for it. And they taught that this pressure could be examined, softened, even released. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." What he meant was that the rush we feel isn't always tied to the world around us. It grows from within, from the stories we tell ourselves, from the invisible clocks we think we must obey. We imagine deadlines that don't truly exist. We race toward finish lines that keep moving, and we forget that stillness is not the same as failure. Peace begins when that imagined rush is set down. The moment we stop running in our minds, the body follows. Muscles let go. Breathing deepens. The day, once full of demands, begins to open up like a calm, wide sea. It was never the tasks that exhausted us. It was the urgency behind them, the sense that we were late for our own lives, that we had to prove something, keep up, fix, improve, justify, produce. But none of that was required to simply exist. Marcus Aurelius, even as an emperor burdened with the weight of an empire, reminded himself again and again, if you seek tranquility, do less. And more than that, do only what's essential, which brings a double satisfaction, doing less and doing it well. This was not a lazy approach. It was clarity, the wisdom to know that energy is not infinite, and that urgency, when left unchecked, burns through it like fire. To rest in peace, while still alive, is to step outside the flame. Urgency often arrives without evidence. It whispers, "You're behind." It murmurs, "You should be doing more." It asks questions with no end. What did you forget? What haven't you done? What will happen if you stop now? And yet, the Stoic answer is a quiet one. If it truly needs doing, you'll return to it when you're ready. Resting is not abandoning your life. It's returning to it with a fuller presence. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. When you allow urgency to pass, something gentle happens. Awareness returns. You begin to see what's actually in front of you. Not the future, not the projection, not the imagined consequence, but just this moment, this body, this breath, this space. It is enough. Peace lives in the space between thoughts, and it grows each time you say, "Not now." I can let that wait. This doesn't mean giving up responsibility. It means stepping out of compulsion. Stoicism never encouraged passivity. It encouraged discernment. And discernment means choosing your pace, not being dragged by it. There is time for movement, and there is time for quiet. Only urgency insists they are the same. The wise person is not the one who finishes first, but the one who notices when there is nothing left to chase. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The mind may still try to stir itself. It may remind you of open tasks, missed messages, or conversations you didn't finish. That's okay. Notice them, smile at them, then watch them go. Like clouds across the sky, they don't require you to do anything. They just pass, and you remain still. Think of a stream running over rocks. The water doesn't force its way forward. It follows the shape of the land. It knows the path by flowing, not by rushing. You can be like that too. Software steady, aligned with what is, not what must be. When urgency ends, you can hear yourself again. You remember that nothing you are is tied to how fast you move. The quality of your life does not depend on your productivity, and you, just as you are, have earned the right to stop, without apology, the right to end the day as it is, the right to rest without earning it first. Even nature teaches this. The sun doesn't strain to set, the moon doesn't hurry to rise, the tide comes in, then recedes, and no part of it doubts its rhythm. So when your thoughts grow quick, and your chest tightens with the sense of being late, pause, return to now. Let it be enough. And if something truly calls for your energy again, it will do so when the time is right. You'll know. But until then, you are free. Free to rest. Free to breathe. Free to be at peace without completing another thing. That kind of peace isn't a reward. It's a choice. And the moment you choose it, urgency begins to dissolve. Like steam off warm water, it rises and fades, leaving behind only what is real, only what matters. only what is here, and already enough.